Mayor Pro Tem of Boulder, and I'm filling in for Mayor Jones tonight, who isn't with us. So I hear that the city manager would like to bring something to our attention, so Jane, take it away.
Thank you, Sam. Just very quickly at each of your places, I have a copy of the latest and we think final version of the Police Oversight Task Force Charter. So earlier this week, our subcommittee, which was Mary, Aaron, and 3 members of the NAACP, met with Amy Kane and made a few changes to the charter, but we think it's in final form and ready to go. We'd like to be able to send out the letter for applicants later this week, and I'm asking that we not have to bring this charter back to City Council next Tuesday for your review, but that you allow the subcommittee to say that it's final and we can move forward seeking applications. So hopefully I'm just going to see some nodding and then we'll be done. Thank you so much. Yeah, yeah, they did a great job.
Just to speak to that, we made only minor changes to what you had put together before, and I think they were not super substantive. So, Mayor, I don't think there's anything we need to highlight to you.
No, I just wanted to extend a thanks to the members of the NAACP who joined us, and especially to Amy Kane for working so hard on this and basically turning this around overnight. So
she's been working extremely hard, and we did have a very productive session with the other folks. So,
well, and thank you, Mary and Aaron, for stepping up to the plate and doing yet another task. So thank you.
Great, so all budget all the time.
Take it away?
Yeah, take it away, Katie.
Good evening, Council. So this is our annual revenue and budget update. The agenda for tonight, I'll be talking about our citywide needs, both our one-time funding options, what we're calling your available toolbox for funding opportunities, and ongoing funding options. And then this year, staff underwent an exercise to really identify all of the major unfunded projects and priorities that we have going on in the city to hopefully set context as we begin the development of the 2020 budget. Then my colleague Joel Wagner will be taking over with the 2018 year-end picture, looking strongly at the sales and use tax and projections for 2019 through 2025, retail sales tax projections based upon some consultant work that we underwent last year. So jumping into the citywide needs, I just wanted to set context of the analysis that we did. So largely we identified projects that were over $1 million. So we know that there are several needs that are under $1 million, but wanted to really identify those that are larger and unfunded. We also excluded the enterprise funds, so our water utility funds. The purpose of the analysis was to align our long-term financial plan. So as many of you know, and as we talked heavily last year, our current revenue forecasts demonstrate that ongoing resources may not be sufficient for existing service levels, and that we do have limited one-time funding opportunities. And then this is, again, your opportunity to begin prioritization conversations with us as we jump into the 2020 budget development and help guide staff on what we should really look forward to in the near term. Looking at just major categories of what these unfunded projects fall under, we really looked at investment into critical facilities. We have a lot of technology that's approaching or just at the end of its life cycle. Also, we know that we've had increased community demand in a lot of our services, and that climate initiatives for the city of Boulder is critical. We also grouped projects into improvements of public spaces and identify new city businesses or service opportunities that we're not currently engaged in. And then finally, grouped categories into the workforce recruitment and retention. So we're gonna dive into, again, one-time funding sources and ongoing funding sources. So again, think of this as your toolbox. One-time funding sources could be anything between utilizing 2018 ending fund balance, and we'll dive into that a little bit more, reducing 2019 and beyond reserves, or utilizing 2019 revenues in excess of expenses, which again would be our 2019 ending fund balance. From an ongoing perspective, tools include reducing services, extending expiring taxes and or implementing new taxes. And then also we have an opportunity to look at this year policy change on recreational marijuana revenue. A large portion of the recreational marijuana revenue is considered one-time dollars still. So one-time funding options, we're gonna dive a little bit more into reserves. So why and how much to hold in general fund reserves? Standard practice is that at minimum 17% is a good baseline, which is about 2 months. But then we also want to look at our risks. Some of our risks include vulnerability to extreme events and public safety concerns. So in the city of Boulder, we do have risks with both nature, fire, and flooding, but also we're a university town that increases our risk. Reserves balance out when revenue sources and/or expenses may be unstable. They can also provide leverage or a match to any grant opportunities. And then additionally, as many of you know, that the general fund provides support to other funds, including the recreational activity fund. So we really want to look at how other funds are dependent on the general fund. And then finally, the rating agencies use the reserve amount when determining bond ratings as one of the factors. We put this up last year, but this is just a comparison to our Front Range communities, demonstrating that at our current 2019 goal of 19%, we're just behind Fort Collins and Denver, with the intention still to reach 20% by 2020. There's also different best practices when you look at funds that are besides the general fund. So special revenue funds, you really want to balance out whether there's more operating or capital dollars in that fund. Operating, you have higher staffing costs, and so you want to hold more in reserves because capital improvements could be delayed if needed. Enterprise funds, like our water utilities, their revenue depend on customer behavior and external factors, so weather, for example. And also the cost of loss of service delivery is high, and so you want to make sure you have higher reserves in those funds. And then internal service funds, while are intended to break even, we do it's responsible to accumulate reserves for the replacement of those assets. So they do have reserves solely for the purpose of replacing critical assets.
Can we ask questions during this, Sam, if they're specific to?
Sure, yeah, if you'd like to, go ahead.
So when you say that those funds require more of a reserve, how much are you talking about?
For the enterprise funds, they're about 25%, the water utilities. I think Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was saying that one loss of day for water utilities about $6 million. So really significant dollars, $6 million. The loss of one day without that service. Special revenue funds largely follow the general fund and range between 15 to 20%, depending on, again, whether they're more heavily focused on operating or capital funds.
And just backing up one, why does being a university town increase our risk?
I think you could just have more special events in your community hosted there, right? Football games, a campus.
Dead.
And then you just have an influx of population at certain times, right? So a real high change that requires more services.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Great, so that wraps up our one-time kind of toolbox. Going on to unfunding options, we're gonna dive into taxes, so specifically property tax and sales and use tax. So for every retail dollar collected, the city of Boulder receives 44 cents of that dollar. And what's important to note of that is less than half goes to the general fund, while the other half goes to our dedicated funds like Parks and Recreation, Open Space, Transportation, and the Community Culture and Safety Tax. Looking at our upcoming sales tax rates, we just wanted to demonstrate that we will be having shifts within our sales tax rates in the various funds. So in 2019, a portion of open space tax shifted to the general fund, which we were planning on. In 2020, overall sales and use tax rate declines due to expiration of a portion of transportation tax and a portion of open space tax shifts to the transportation fund. In 2022, our overall sales and use tax rates declines due to the expiration of the Community Culture and Safety Tax. In 2025, overall sales and use tax declines due to the expiration of a portion of general fund tax. In 2030, a portion of transportation tax shifts to the general fund. And in 2035, a portion of open space tax shifts to the general fund. Again, these are all planned shifts that were approved by the voters in the ballot language. The colors demonstrate the general fund in gray, community culture safety tax in orange, the 0.25 cent sales tax, which is dedicated to Parks and Recreation in gray, open space in green, and transportation at the top in that maroon color. So property tax, similarly, for every dollar collected, it's always important to reminder that the city only receives about 14 cents to that dollar. A large portion of it goes to the county and the schools. And then of that, the general fund receives about 80% of the dollars, but we do have some dedicated funds that receive property tax dollars, including the Community Housing Assistance Program, Parks and Recreation, and the Library Fund. So I'm going to spend a minute explaining how and who calculates property taxes. So you take your actual value of your property, which is determined by the county using the market rate approach. And then in this approach, it's based on analysis of comparable sales. So in 2019, the taxes that are paid in 2020 are based upon a valuation that uses comparable sales from all of 2017 and half of 2018. So essentially, there's a lag when you go to calculate your value of your property. And then when you look at the assessment rate, or the percent of property value that's subject to the taxation, in each odd number year, the residential rate is subject to change by the Colorado legislature as prescribed by the Gallagher Amendment. And then the change in that percentage maintains the present balance of the tax burden between residential and all other taxpayers. And that's how you come up with your assessed value, or the value that you're going to pay on the millage. Any questions on this?
I do have a question. If you go back one slide.
Yes.
The distribution of the 14 cents, is that something that voters have to approve if we wanted to reallocate a certain amount of that from, say, the general fund to the library? Or is that something that we can do as part of the budget process?
I don't know. I'm looking to Tom as perhaps a resource. It's in the charter, so it would likely be a charter change at least.
Charter change, and I'd have to think about whether there's a Tabor question as well.
So the charter says 1 penny to the library, this distribution is in the charter. Okay. It would be good to know for sure at some point if this is really charter mandated.
Okay, I can take a look right now.
Okay, I'm going to weigh in. I'm not a lawyer, but I play one on TV. What I think is, if you wanted to dedicate the part of the 9 cents, not the 1 cent, that's already dedicated to the library, but part of the 9 cents, if you wanted that to go exclusively to the library, you could put it to a vote, or you could do it in the budget. And if you do it in the budget, then every year you could change it. But if you put it to a vote, then it would be dedicated in that fashion.
Yeah, I wasn't proposing dedication. I was just asking about the flexibility. So what is in the charter that we have to follow, and then what is just part of the budgeting process?
Right, so the 9 cents is just part of the budget. The rest of it, all of the ones that are spelled out except the general fund must go to those places, but the general fund can go to anything in the city.
So why is the general, is that true with the general public safety as well? Because that's green.
Right, so that has to go to public safety.
And
It has been voted on to go to public safety.
So I guess I'm wondering, I can't remember what year, but at some point there was a vote, and I think it was 1995 or 1996, and I think there was some money put for parks, there was some money for housing and human services, and that was kind of the marriage and how it was kind of sold to
I think that was the
voters.
original .15.
And yeah, and then there was arts, money for the arts was in there.
That was a sales tax, not a property tax. And I believe that we debruced that earlier in the 2000s, and I think it all goes to the general fund now.
That's
And is
correct.
allocated through the budget.
With
But
no
I guess
restriction.
the question is, these percentages, this 1 cent, 1 cent, was that actually voted on by the people?
So I think the answer is we don't know for sure right now, but I believe that it was, or it's in the charter, which was voted on by the people.
Right.
Yeah.
right.
So and the library is in the charter, section 134. So it requires that 1/3 of a mill, the tax levy, go to a library fund to be used exclusively for library purposes.
Okay.
So you'd have to change the charter if you want.
And same with the parks and the
Correct.
chat.
I know the parks is for sure.
Okay, great, thank you.
Can I ask a question as well? This is on the property tax. So the revaluation, Do we have a sense yet of what that's looking like?
Yeah, so DOLA, or the Department of Local Affairs, let me get to it because I actually have it at the very bottom. They do an initial calculation at the end of each year, and so based upon by the classes, so by residential or non-residential, and this came out in December, and I believe I provided a link in the memo, but based upon initial calculations, they estimated that residential may increase up to 15% and commercial up to 15%, but they also anticipate that the residential assessment rate may decrease again. Coincidentally, they typically put their final report, because it does have to go through the legislature, out mid-April, so we're probably a week or two away from seeing what that looks like.
And I know it was in the memo, I don't remember the exact number, the anticipated decrease in the residential percentage.
7.2 to 6.95 is what
Okay.
they have calculated.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Great. So I wanted to just remind everyone what the general fund supports, because they do several departments that don't have any dedicated funding source, including police and fire and the internal service departments, both of those kind of in the yellow shading, and human services, finance, and IT. We're showing you this because we're going to set up 2 different slides that does a municipal comparison of like services. So just wanted to remind everyone what the general fund does support. So first, we wanted to compare municipal sales tax rates. So what you'll see here is what the general fund portion is. You'll notice that the general fund portion compared to other communities is relatively low, and the second lowest, just behind Longmont. But when you start to stack up other dedicated sales tax rates like open space here, parks and recreation, public safety, transportation, capital improvements or community projects, and historic preservation, you'll notice that we do creep up to probably the second highest rate at that point. When you add in the state rate, RTD, which Fort Collins doesn't have a sales tax rate for, the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District, which again Fort Collins doesn't have a tax for, and the county, we do end up with one of the highest of these municipal comparisons.
Just Broomfield's pretty high too. I don't see them on.
Broomfield's a hard one to do because they're both a city and a county, and so breaking it out, but we could certainly try to look deeper into it.
Yeah, I seem to remember they were a little higher than we are.
Yeah. So looking at then property tax. This is the city mill levy. We have one of the higher rates, but it is important to note that the city mill supports, like we just showed you, both the general fund as well as other special revenue sources. But other communities provide some of the general fund services that we provide through districts. So this is a Parks and Recreation district, fire district in those communities, library district, and then a small bond. So this is really where we would pause and say this is kind of what typical municipal services are provided. So largely this is provided through the city's mill rate, but in these other communities they do have special districts that provide the similar service. And so we start to have one of the lower overall property tax for municipal-like services.
So can I ask a quick question here? Just for apples to apples comparison, we have some dedication within the property tax in the mills, right?
Correct.
So in a way, it's like we have these other districts, we're just rolling it all up into one in the charter.
Yes, so in that 11.981, you have a portion that goes to Parks and Recreation, but it just supports a small portion of Parks and Recreation, not their full budget, versus the district be its full budget.
So just to be clear, that what Sam just said was that wheel that we were looking at
Correct.
earlier.
Yep. Yeah, a large portion goes to the general fund with some smaller pieces, but you are correct, it does encompass the total city mill rate. So we add on other districts, which are typically water districts, which is a small portion. But then we add on schools and counties. And you'll see that Boulder is the third lowest overall when looking at those municipal comparisons. So again, as a reminder, when we start talking about the actual unfunded priorities, you have kind of 2 sets of toolboxes. Within one-time funding sources, we anticipate that utilizing the 2018 ending fund balance is roughly $14 million. Again, these are all preliminary, but to give an order of magnitude. If you wanted to reduce 2019 and beyond reserves, each percentage is about $1.3 million. And then we don't know yet what utilizing 2019 revenues in excess of expense, or again, the ending fund balance for 2019 will be, but we do anticipate that we have ending fund balance every year. And then from ongoing funding sources, similar to last year, we could reduce services up to a certain dollar amount. Extending that 0.15 sales tax rate that goes away in 2020 lends about $5 million. And then for every mill and property tax, you get about $3.6 million. And then again, shifting the recreational marijuana revenue from one-time to ongoing is about $4 million. It is important to note that flipping it from one-time to ongoing does mean that it's been not available for one-time sources.
So quick question, a reminder, the expiring 0.15% is transportation?
Correct. And open space shifts a portion of their 0.15 to make transportation whole.
Well, it isn't the net effect that it all goes out of the open space funding? So the 0.15, I mean, it's technically a transportation tax that's expiring, but it's open space that's losing the funding.
Correct. Okay, jumping into the unfunded priorities. Again, these are our criteria for projects that are categorized. I won't repeat them all, but you'll see them show up when we talk about the various projects. So we spent a lot of time talking about one-time and ongoing. And you'll see in the presentation, we identified a proposal to fund some one-time priorities listed in that green, but we'll need to utilize various tools if we need or want to fund the other projects. So you have on your table and in the packet attachment A. I figured it might be easier to see it printed out, but more detail of each project is listed on there if you want a deep description. So investment in critical facilities are things like Fire Station 3 relocation or Alpine Balsam hospital deconstruction, as well as some critical deficiencies within the fire stations themselves. Things that have increased in community demand include the library master plan, maintaining service levels, or just core transportation maintenance and operations, as well as transit service expansions. We do have several technologies that are coming up for the end of life cycle replacement, including the records management system, both for fire and the Muni Court software. Within kind of a new business or service opportunity is this idea of middle income housing subsidization. And improvement in public spaces would be Long's Garden improvements. And within workforce recruitment and retention, we have the conversation around living wage increases. The city is engaging in a compensation parity and employee retention study. Again, unknown cost, so that's not included in that $48.4 million total. And then there may be some legal requirements for para that are mandated.
Can I ask a question about them? You have several items that are kind of system replacements, system upgrades, management systems, software replacement. Don't we amortize for that? Don't we have a sinking fund for that? Don't we plan for obsolescence and renewal? Or is this over and above what we budgeted for?
A little bit of both. So as technology has changed and needs have shifted, some of these are higher cost than anticipated in the replacement funds. And then I think it's just similar to what we saw in the community culture safety tax, that for a while we weren't putting away those funding sources for annual replacement. So just getting them back on that cycle. So to be replaced and then get them on a cycle where we are proactive and don't have to come in a big lump sum.
Okay, so our plan going forward, setting aside these specific needs, our plan going forward is to have a regular item in the budget that's I don't know if it's capital or operating, but a fund for those things that we anticipate will become stale or obsolete over time.
That's best practice.
So we're not surprised.
Yep, and these ones just haven't had those dollars built up.
Okay, and that's because we didn't allocate for them, or that they're more expensive than we thought? Okay.
I have to weigh in, since this is my business, professional business, but software generally is an operating cost these days rather than a capital cost. It sort of surprises me to see millions of dollars in capital. I know that's an older model, but anyway, I'd hope we could look towards using some newer purchases for software that don't hit us with hard to fund capital projects.
All right, so now we're looking at breaking those projects not by the categories, but into one-time and ongoing. And so as I mentioned, we have a proposed funding mechanism. That's the green portion that was a small piece. So we are proposing exhausting 2018 excess fund balance to the tune of about $14 million to help fund the hospital deconstruction, the Fire Station 3 construction, and then replacement of the Boulder fire records management system.
So question about that. The total for those 3 projects is more than 14 million. So,
Yep.
or is there funding coming from elsewhere? Okay.
So next, to fund that total, is utilizing one-time dollars for the 2020 budget, both for the Alpine Balsam and the hospital site. And then finally, to cover the remaining gap, we do have some general fund dollars that we anticipated would be needed for Fire Station 3, but we didn't specifically allocate through the 2019, or we didn't identify through the 2019 budget for Fire Station 3. So those 3 tools combined equal the needed dollars.
So can I ask a question on Fire Station 3, the construction? How much money out of the capital, the cultural safety, how much was dedicated for Fire Station 3? I thought it was around 13 million or.
12.5 million, thanks, Joel. He's a good
Okay,
sidekick.
so it's pretty close. So how did we so badly underestimate in that now we're being asked for another $7.5 million? That seems like a big off. I mean, that's a pretty large error. How does that happen?
Yeah. I may let Chief also explain. My understanding is both the land purchase
It was the land purchase. I believe we were thinking that the land purchase would be 4 to 5 million.
Yeah.
And instead, it was 9 million.
Yep.
And we had a really hard time finding that piece of property.
And then I have another question. If my understanding is right, in terms of residential properties, usually that costs $250, $300 a square foot. In this fire station, it's being estimated that it's between $700 and $800 a square. How do we get to that number?
I'm not an owner of residential values, but Chief would certainly.
Good evening, Council. Mike Calderazzo, Fire Chief. So FAM does the numbers for us, but for the most part, the reason it is so expensive, besides the fact that at this point in time, getting construction contracts for cheap is not easy in the Denver metro region. Fire stations themselves, though, are pretty complicated, more complicated than you would imagine. Would be built, especially because we're talking about large trucks being housed inside, the sleeping facilities, decontamination, the way the air is filtered in the stations because of the EMS and all the different things they do, the fire, keep their gear separate, decontaminated in different places. And so all those little configurations create a complexity of building that actually ramps up the cost. We were originally thinking it was going to be around $500 to $600 a square foot. And after talking with FAM, their experience actually suggests that we go higher than that to be safe, given the way that contracts are being awarded right now for commercial.
And who is FAM?
I'm sorry, Fleet and Facilities and Asset Management.
Just came up to the table. Michelle Crane, City Facilities Design and Construction Manager. So another potential key distinction in what you're talking about with $300 a square foot. A lot of times people talk about just construction cost, which can be less, around $300 a square foot. The budgets that we put together are what we call owner's budgets. So they include all of the soft costs, all of the general conditions, all of the permitting fees, and that many times can get you to double the cost. And then also with the challenge we've had with getting land, and when we're going to start construction, there's escalation in there, and we're seeing really big amounts of escalation over years. And by the time we actually get to bid, likely we're a couple years out from now, and so escalation over a couple of years, this is reasonable, so we don't come back again and under budget. So that's where those numbers were coming from.
Going back to the cost of the land chain, I seem to recall that we ended up having to buy more land than we needed just because that was for sale. Can we monetize the excess land?
I think we're thinking about a way to do that. One of the other thoughts, though, is that part of the land might be used for affordable housing, and that would be our sort of donation to the affordable housing ability for whatever developer it was. So we haven't decided yet, but yes, there is excess land, and we could monetize it, or we could focus on affordable housing there.
And that would just save us affordable housing dollars from some other place. In other words, it's
Or it could achieve our goal sooner.
sooner. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
What happens to the land where the fire station is now?
It's in the floodplain, and it's unusable.
Was there severe flooding there during the 2011 event, or 13, or whenever it was?
That's a great question. It actually turns out to be one of the stations that did not get flooded.
Yeah, there's irony. Have you thought about a bake sale?
I've thought about a lot of sales.
Here comes Jeff to talk about flooding.
So I just want to clarify. So I believe the station we're talking.
Can you identify?
Jeff Arthur, I'm Director of Public Works for Utilities. So I did want to clarify, if we're talking about fire station in the Boulder Creek floodplain, the flooding on Boulder Creek in 2013 was talked about as being in the 30-year event versus some other parts of town that had closer to 100-year events. So the flooding experience there in 2013 would not be indicative of what we'd expect in a 100-year floodplain. Kind of for context, Home Depot is elevated to be out of the floodplain, so that's more the depth of water we're talking about through there.
Can I drill into that just a little bit more? Is it in the 100-year floodplain, the high hazard? What zone is that in?
I believe it is just in the 100, although there may be conveyance or high hazard that goes down Arapahoe.
Okay.
Wait, are we talking about the fire station or Home Depot?
The existing fire
Home
station.
Depot is out, but you remember there used to be a wall along Arapahoe?
Right,
That was a
right.
flood wall, and that actually wasn't as high as it needed to be. So when the site was redeveloped, all that fill that's there is to keep that site out of the floodplain.
So what's the elevation difference between the creek and Home Depot? I hadn't thought about that, and I had forgotten about the flood wall.
It is significant. I mean, it has to be, it's probably a good 10 feet.
Yeah, I was
isn't
going
it?
to say 10, 12 feet, something like that.
It's in that ballpark, so there would be a lot of water there.
So if I can just finish out here. So I totally get that we don't want a fire station where that current fire station is, but not tonight, but I'd be interested in hearing what the thoughts are on future use of that, whether it becomes part of Scott Carpenter Park or if it's in a flood area where you could do some other non-critical uses. So anyway, if we could just get some more information about that, that'd be helpful.
So Mary?
Yeah, Jeff, don't go away. So we often get development proposals, site reviews that include development in the 100-year plain, or we look at proposals and we're reassured that it can be built up to get out of the 100-year plain, floodplain. What's the difference between those proposals and the fire station?
I don't have a map in front of me, but generally what you would end up doing, I'm assuming it may be also in the conveyance and or high hazard. I'm sorry. So if it was just in the 100-year floodplain, there are options to elevate for residential uses or to flood-proof for non-residential uses. My guess, without having a map in front of me, is that it's either in the conveyance zone, in which case you can't add things that would make the water deeper for someone else, or it's in the high hazard zone, which means the water around it is fast or deep enough that it would sweep someone away. So I would speculate that it's probably in one or both of those, because through there's water in Arapahoe that's trying to get back to the creek. And again, actually, if we're saying it's 10 feet deep, it would definitely be in the high hazard zone, because it's based on it.
My recollection was that it was in one of these zones that just meant it absolutely couldn't be improved going forward.
It's a critical facility, isn't it? So how would you get the truck out if you have 12 feet of water? I mean, even if you elevated the station, unless you have a swimming vehicle, but
But you can, in a high hazard zone, have passive recreational uses. It's, you don't want parking because cars are going to float away. You don't want structures. You don't want people taking shelter there. But in terms of a passive park type use where people are going to be ambulatory and aware, that's potential use for the
So
corner.
Tom pulled up a map and it's showing in the high hazard zone.
Yeah, and that makes sense based on what the depths would have to be.
Okay, shall we move on? I had one other question before we move on, though. Jane, you talked about the cost of the land was $9 million, and we were expecting 4 or 5, so that's about $4.5 million, and the delta is 7.5. So is the remaining $3 million for increased construction costs, or?
I believe so, as Michelle explained.
Okay, and how much extra land is there roughly? Do we know how many acres?
I think there's 3/4 of an acre or 0.8, something like that.
Thank you.
I'm going to move away from the fire station number 3 specifically, but I did want to ask a question about the excess fund balance. I don't recall in past years seeing that amount laid out as to what it's going to be used for. So I was curious to know what it's been in the past and what it's been used for.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I do want to explain what excess fund balance does mean, because we often talk about fund balance and reserves. So excess fund balance is you take your revenues, less your expenses, less your reserves. So we're talking our 19% reserve goal. And that's what we call excess fund balance. So it's really those dollars that are undedicated. And oftentimes excess fund balance is used to cover our adjustment to base processes. So whatever was left over from the last year gets rebudgeted during the adjustment to base process, because that's one-time dollars, and ATBs are largely one-time adjustments to the budget. And then sometimes we do intentionally budget to use that as a one-time funding source when we don't have additional one-time dollars available. So in the 2019 budget, we did see a draw from that decreased between 18 and 19. So it's for one-time items.
So if I understood you correctly, the reason we haven't seen this in the past itemized the way it is this year is because it was just adjustment to base and budgeted for the following year.
Correct.
Or there wasn't any.
Or it's or it's there for additional opportunities if they come up throughout the year, or to be repurposed. And $14 million is about what we see on average each year as available excess fund balance. So this year we would just completely draw that down.
Just following up on that, last year we had the 14 million excess property tax. Is that, if my memory serves? And I wondered where, and I asked at the time during the budget process where that was going. Would that go into something like this as well? I mean, it was over and above because of the new assessments.
Yeah, so you're talking through the 2018 budget process, how assessment values were, a lot higher than what we had projected, which is our typical 5% increase. And so a lot of the property tax increase dollars, if I'm recalling correctly, were utilized for ongoing items. And so some of this supported developing the general fund capital program to be an ongoing capital dollar amount. We also used it for several human service related items that were also ongoing. And so to the extent that we wouldn't have utilized the full dollar amount, it could have fallen to the excess fund balance, but I do believe that we utilized a lot of those additional dollars for core services.
Well, maybe following up on Mary's question, it would be interesting going forward to see where those funds are expended, just for our information.
Yeah.
And if I could just say, thank you for calling that out, because I think that these amounts have been hidden a little bit, I think, in past budget cycles, so I appreciate it being given visibility.
Yeah, we focus a lot on either taxes or revenues and then reserves, and less about kind of what's after the fact. So happy to show it.
So that does raise another question about the general fund, capital fund that the city's been trying to grow over the last few years. Does that mean, because it's going to be totally expended this year, that excess fund balance, does that mean that there will be no money going into that capital fund?
Nope, the plan still is in our ongoing. I'm going to switch slides real quick because I pulled it up there. So we do have a proposal, like I said, to allocate some of those dollars that weren't previously identified to the fire station. But here's what we've planned for and have budgeted for our general fund capital dollars. The goal was to start out kind of around 3% and build up to 5% by, I think we'd do that by 2023. So that's already in the budget. So if we were to utilize the excess fund balance, we still have this already budgeted, so we wouldn't be taking away from general fund capital. I do want to remind everyone that we have exhausted a lot of the general fund capital dollars on 2 major projects, that being the Hogan Land purchase repayment to the owners and then broadband. So you'll see in the box, those 2 general fund capital dollars are what I'm proposing for fire station land overage. After that, in 2021, there is an opportunity that's not been identified for general fund capital to the tune of $3.45 million.
You know, on the broadband, isn't that certificates of participation? Is it purely certificate of participation?
Yeah. For the 20 years that it's.
And so this is just the payoff,
Yes.
the monthly, the annual amount we're
Yes.
paying off of?
Yep.
Okay.
For the 20 year.
And could you remind me, how much do we have right now in COPS total? I mean, we put a lot in the Alpine Balsam, and then we have this project, and then I think there's a third one, but
Cheryl Patelli, CFO. We were talking about using them for the parking garage for the
up on
hotel.
the
That
hill.
was the other one. So
And we
right
killed
now, it's just Alpine Balsam and the upcoming broadband issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And do you know what percentage that is, or how much? I think it's like 40 million for
40 for the
Alpine Balsam
hospital.
and 15 for,
15 to 20 for broadband.
okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Young, does this help answer the general fund question? Yes, it does. Okay. You're welcome.
And could we have that sent to us, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. So we identified these as proposed funding sources, but when looking at some of our unfunded ongoing dollars, these are the types of projects that we're talking about. And unfunded one-time dollars, these would be the types of projects that we would be talking about for the initial cost. So I'm just going to pause here and let you take a look at the list.
So just to make sure that I understand the potential, and I know we haven't talked about it yet, but the potential to shift the marijuana dollars to ongoing would mean that we could apply those to the unfunded ongoing dollars. And if we leave them in one time, then we can fund the other list with that.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's not allocated as of yet, the marijuana revenue?
So when you say the 16.3 million in unfunded ongoing dollars, that's an annual amount?
Correct.
Okay, but I do see like radio services infrastructure in there, which sounds to me like capital.
So the part of the radio services infrastructure is to include ongoing dollars for the replacement, similar to what Bob brought up for the software replacements. In the past, we weren't putting away as much for the ongoing replacement of it, and it is multi-million dollars when it does come time for
That's just you're
replacement.
amortizing the capital purchase over, okay.
Katie, one of the things I noticed is on, I guess, is line 12 of the sheet that you put on our table here. You've got, for the middle-income housing subsidization, $3 million ongoing. That's included in that 16 million ongoing unfunded dollars, is that correct?
Correct.
And is that must be more than just the down payment assistance program. That's more broadly for other types of middle-income?
I believe this was just related to the down payment assistance program,
Okay.
ensuring that we had those dollars available.
So that's based on a meeting that Cheryl and Bob and Sam and I and Kurt had a couple days ago. I think that number's going to be quite a bit lower, so you might want to visit with them.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, in addition, we're talking about a pilot stage first, rather than, we don't know for sure if it will be ongoing or not. So, and the last thing I'll say about that, because I agree that we need to look at this, is there's $1 million in the H2O program that's not being drawn down essentially at all. And so there was conversations about using the H2O dollars as the starting point for a pilot. So anyway.
Yeah, and to be fair, when talking with housing, they did provide a range of anywhere between 0 and, 5 million or however big we wanted to put the program. So they just recommended, for the information that we had at the time, to put in $3 million. All these numbers are preliminary, can shift depending on choices that are made.
So that kind of raises, I guess, another question in my mind. If middle-income housing subsidization was 0 to 5 and you kind of put in 3 as a swag, I guess it calls into question what other numbers here are ranges. In other words, I think the next time we see this, if this is just midpoints of swags, swag 1 to swag 2, and you're just kind of putting a number in the middle, it'd probably be helpful for council to see those ranges. Because if the ranges are really significant, that probably means there's a lack of precision at this point in time because it's uncertain, as opposed to really narrow ranges where we really are sure that this particular software is going to cost us $750,000. We either buy it or we don't. So that would be helpful to know.
No, I appreciate that. That's a great idea, and we can certainly do it. I think because middle-income housing would be kind of a new business we would be getting into, or a service that we were providing, that's really one of the most swaggiest dollar amounts, for lack of a technical term, but a lot of those really have been vetted because they are in the immediate needs. They have been in master plans. They have been in unfunded capital dollars, and staff have done a lot of the project planning already. But to give comfort to the fact, I certainly can provide ranges for the other pieces.
I have a question about the transportation expansion, that $5.72 million. So it includes the buy-up for the jump bound and hop expansion.
Correct.
So I'm curious, 11. And I'm curious about the jump and the hop in particular. The jump is one that goes all the way out to Lafayette and services a lot of the county. The hop is something that really services the university to a large extent. So I'm wondering if that 5.72 considered that potentially other entities could contribute.
It's nice to have a lot of friends in the audience.
Right. Great. Kathleen Brackey, Transportation. Great questions. There's a lot of different services within that line item that are kind of rolled up to that 5.7. So the buy-ups for the routes such as the bound and the jump would help augment that service and buy back the higher frequency service on those routes. That is something that's operated by RTD, and so we look to do those cost share arrangements with them. On the HOP, we currently do partner with several organizations to co-fund the HOP. So that's funded through the city and also the CU students as well as RTD. So we're very open to partnerships to fund all of the current transit service as well as future. So we would look to leverage these dollars as much as possible between any other existing or new partnerships, I guess is the short answer.
So on the jump, right now, it's planned to just be the city and RTD cost sharing on those? Or has, for example, has Lafayette been approached to contribute to that buy-up?
So for the jump service compared to the long jump service, which is the regional, there's two versions of the jump. And so if we're going to call it the short jump or the local jump would be co-funded primarily between the City of Boulder and RTD. Certainly as we look to grow the regional bus rapid transit service on State Highway 7 all the way out from Boulder to Brighton, there could be other opportunities to co-fund that expanded service over time as well. This is just a short-term fix to try and bring back the higher quality service that used to be out there that RTD has cut over the last several years.
And what is the headway expected?
So
with this amount?
So I don't have all the specific headways because they vary by the different times of day, but our goal is to get the high frequency, like 10-minute frequency during the peak hour. And at this time, it's back basically at a half-hour service on the jump today. So we're looking to try and get that back to be the higher quality, higher frequency service. So again, and as a bridge to the longer term, more high-performing all-day-long bus rapid transit.
Lisa?
Right, so I guess it's back to Mary's question, though. Have you approached the county and asked them to contribute to this expansion?
So yes, we work with all of our partners to expand the service on each of these routes. And again, this line item includes more than just the jump and the bound. I'll give an example for a grant project that we just applied for through the Dr. Cog sub-regional TIP process to seek funding to leverage the dollars to grow the HOP service. So that's looking favorable for the HOP service. So that would be a way to help co-fund these needs with federal grant dollars for a 3-year period of time.
Yeah, but I'm asking specifically about the county, because the bound also goes through the county. And so I just feel like the county should be putting in.
We'll certainly continue to ask the county to see if they can help co-fund.
Because I just,
we do that on a regular basis.
Right. They're all just added expenses, and I think the county needs to pay its share.
Okay.
Aaron?
So, and I'll note, quite favorable on the HOP expansion. We got preliminary approval from the county subform, so it's looking very good for that HOP expansion, which is great. But Kathleen, I just want to ask, so you're talking about buy-ups with RTD. I thought they weren't really offering those right now because of like driver shortages and such.
Right, so currently RTD has expressed that they won't accept buy-ups, but that is something we're continuing to work on, not only by the City of Boulder and Boulder County, but also City and County of Denver, to continue to press RTD to be open to that service method.
So a little aspirational there, but.
Yes, but very necessary to try and build back the service that's been cut.
So I have a question about spreading some of these expenses out. So when things are one-time expenses, but we don't want to pay it all at once, or we can find a partner who will accept multiple payments over multiple years to spread out the payment, is there a way to have that represented? Because these are all shown as the total dollar amounts paid all at once. And for even some of the ones that are up in green, it seems like those are going to accrue over time.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. This is kind of the challenge with our capital improvement, not challenge, but the way that we need to budget per state regulations, and is that in order to go under contract, right, you must have all of the funds available to encumber. So even if you know that the project's going to take 2 years, if you're utilizing the same contractor, the same vendor for construction of pieces, you must have those dollars up front. And so that poses kind of a timing challenge, even though we know that we will roll over those dollars in the next year. So in some instances, you are able to break up contracts into discrete pieces, and we do that when we can, but oftentimes it does require a large upfront sum.
Any more questions here?
Yeah, and to follow up on Sam's question, some contracts are likely more flexible than others, perhaps, and so I'm thinking of like the Longs Garden conservation easement. That seems to me that it's something that could be worked out with the family, and it doesn't require that kind of encumberment.
It'd be depending on the terms of the agreement or work or scope of work.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so jumping into our intermediate needs, which is really looking at 2021 to 2024, our investments in critical facilities is a pretty long list, including the continuation of the Alpine Balsam Pavilion remodel and some fire station relocations. And then it's important to note that those two asterisks for rental space is if the pavilion didn't occur. So there is a need that the New Britain buildings and the buildings across the way do have to be vacated. So our options are to remodel the pavilion or find rental space for New Britain. So did want to point that out. Within the end-of-life cycle technology, our enterprise resource planning system, additional dollars are needed. This is our Munis financial and HR system. For increase in community demand, several projects there, highlighting the master plan, the different service levels, including North Boulder. Some Parks and Recreation and police master plans are upcoming in that time frame too, and so we don't currently know the cost of those, but it is anticipated that master plans do highlight unfunded needs, and then some additional transportation dollars.
So I have a question about this North Boulder Library Master Plan, and I think it's like something like 3.5 million operating costs. And part of the problem with the North Boulder Library is that since '95, we've actually had the funds for the building, but then they've gotten sold or they've gotten traded off for a fire station or different things. But it always comes down to, well, we can have the funds for the building, but we don't have operational costs, so we can't build a North Boulder Library. Now, last year, we passed a tax that put $5 million, I think it was around that, towards the construction of the North Boulder Library. So when I saw this, I was very surprised. So now we have the money for the building, but we don't have the money for the operations. Is that what you're telling us?
Currently unfunded. We would need to find the dollars for the operations.
Well, that can't be the case because, I mean, I think people voted thinking this library was going to happen, is going to happen. And to have unfunded operating dollars is not acceptable. So maybe we need to look at this general fund and do a dedication of maybe a cent from our general fund and make that a dedication.
Bob, just kind of follow on. I just want to make sure I understand the line item 33 that I think Lisa was talking about. It says $3.6 million ongoing for North Boulder Library. Is that $3.6 million over the course of those 4 budget years, or $3.6 million each year? I can't imagine it's going to cost us $3.6 million to run the North Boulder Library.
No, it's not. I'd have to go back and analyze what those costs were. Those are all costs from the master plan, and those are ongoing operating costs to get to the point where we are meeting community demand, which, if you remember, was a whole different level of the plan. The master plan calls for fewer than 6 FTE, which is a substantial cost, but it's not anywhere near $3.5 million for the operating costs. And then there's maintenance costs associated with the building, and those have been estimated for us by FAM. I think they're around $180,000 a year for North Boulder maintenance costs. So I think we're probably closer in the range of 1.1, 1.2.
Right.
But I'd need to go back and look at all the data. So the 3.5, yeah, thank you.
Right, and
That's over the lifespan of when North Boulder comes on to 2024, so it's the cost of over 3 years of operations.
Okay, because in previous conversations, I thought we were moving some things around at different libraries in order to make things a little more equitable.
Well, and I mean, did that include the funding you don't need to provide for the corner library? I mean, is that, so it's 1.1 additional on top of what we're currently paying for? Okay.
So now I'm confused, because if line 33 is $3.6 million, but it's over those 4 budget years, 21, 22, 23, 24. So roughly, call it $900,000 a year times 4 years equals $3.6 million, right? So then, Katie, are other items above that also over the 4 budget years? So for example, the line right above that, which is on the previous page, 32, Library Master Plan, 6.5 million. Is that 6.5 million per year or 6.5 million over 4 budget years?
That one's over 4 budget years for the Library Master Plan, because we did have those numbers already kind of vetted through the consultant master plan.
So there's a whole bunch of other ongoings, though, on this page. Are those, should we all divide all those numbers by 4 also? So like, for example, line 31 or line 21 or line 28, those are all over 4-year periods of time, not per year?
No, but we can further clarify when we revise this with kind of the ranges and then give an estimate of whether that's annual or over a course of period of time.
That would be very helpful.
Yeah, that would be really, really helpful, because this page in particular was kind of jaw-dropping and
Overwhelming.
yeah, it was overwhelming. It was insomnia-inducing, but It was very challenging to see these numbers. I mean, I hadn't heard, so this is a question.
So-
But Bob, finish.
Well, so I'm really perplexed now because this whole thing totals out at line 58 at $205 million, but you're telling us that some of that is one time, some of it's annual, and some of it's spread over 4 years. So I'm really confused now.
Yep.
Because
If I can go to the next slide, I can help clarify some of that piece of it. We'll get through new businesses, so largely looking at EMS potential services. And again, our goal for electrification of the hot buses and potential for in-house custodial services, which is currently being explored as part of the living wage update. So looking towards kind of the unfunded ongoing dollars, this is what we're looking at. And again, we'll help break out. Largely, those are just annual costs aside from the library master plan. And then this is kind of where that overall dollar amount for intermediate kind of spiked, to marry your point. So when we look at 72 million, this would be what the total bond payment would need to be, but really it's roughly $4 million a year spread over however many years we would want to do the bond payment. So it puts a little bit more into perspective, and that would be for the Alpine Balsam remodel and some of those site improvements. And then our one-time costs are those opportunities and projects.
And so, since we are doing Fire Station 3 and that came with sticker shock, what do you anticipate for Fire Station 2 and 4?
So each of those, I believe in the packet, are listed around $20 million
Right.
for both land and construction.
So if I might ask, if we look at this as an annual amount that's unmet, it's about 35 million a year unmet annually. And then you've spread out the Alpine Balsam project by bonding for it. Is that how?
A potential option for that, yes. Would be more realistic to break it up to smaller pieces annually.
And could you bond for those other unfunded one-time dollars as well?
Up into our bonding capacity, potentially.
Yeah, so, I mean, it seems, we see them as one time, you put them out that way, but they certainly could be bonded for, and then that would spread things out significantly.
Yeah, that would certainly be a tool in the toolbox.
I mean, I think one thing that might be helpful for us to see is that, you
Sure.
can lay it out just like this, and then, I don't know what our bonding capacity is or how close that is to it, but you could say you could bond for X amount and spread out the payments, which would be this amount per year.
Yeah, we can certainly provide that.
Thanks.
And could you tell us what our bonding capacity is?
Cheryl again. I can speak to that. So our capacity, we have a law related to our capacity that relates to our general obligation bonds. But if you have a revenue source that you're backing those bonds with, it doesn't really hit that limit. So really, when you talk about capacity, you want to talk about how are you going to fund the debt service payments, and then also how are the rating agencies going to review the level of debt that you have at the city. So those would be things that we would need to consider if we were going to take on all of this debt. Plus, we have other things on the horizon that might be pretty large numbers, such as municipalization and broadband and all of those things.
Right, and just for clarification, when we get like a AAA rating, then we have much lower interest rates on those bonds than we would have if we had double B or something like that.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's an interest rate.
Correct. Yep.
And if I could just throw in just to point out, these are some very large numbers. I mean, these projects, some of them certainly are optional, right? I mean, they're not all of them are absolutely critical to the future of the city. And I will also point out that some of them are one or the other, like the rental space, if we don't do the pavilion, is up there in the ongoing, but if we did the pavilion, we only have to pay for that, not the other thing. So it takes a little bit of the sting out of some of these very large numbers.
Again, this is all to provide context to help us have you help us prioritize what really needs to get accomplished, and a lot of these are choices.
And just kind of following on Aaron's point, with respect to some of the master plans, like the Parks and Rec plan and maybe the fire master, the police master plan, these are all at the vision level, right? In other words,
We currently don't have any estimates for them because they're going to be undergoing it, so we didn't put any dollar amounts in there, but once we were to undergo it, we would have very different levels, kind of the...
Okay, well, maybe those were bad examples. The library master plan, the numbers you included for the two numbers you included for the library master plan to come up to 30.7 million, were those at the vision level as opposed to their mid-level or their maintained service level?
The meet community demand is what the mid-level is for the other master plan kind of categories. When you get into our long-term needs and we talk about the expansion of services for the library, that's where you get into the vision portion of it.
Okay.
So, but this is above and beyond the maintained current level,
Correct.
right? So it is a notch up from the maintained current level.
Yep.
Got it. And yeah, I mean, I think that's also, Bob, an interesting question because I see Pearl Street Mall refresh in there, right? And that's obviously got to be in the Parks master plan. But I would have a question of how Parks has rank ordered what they want to see happen, whether, because that's like a CIP almost, right? It's like, we need this capital improvement in this park. Well, how does that fit in with the other priorities that they have? I don't know if we want it here, but it's, I think, important to understand that, yes, they're choices, but also they may be choices that are made by a department and their advisory board.
If they have the funding available, correct.
And just to be clear, nothing up here has been committed to. In other words, these are all things that we could do incremental to what we're doing today. There may be really important things or things we really want to do, but we haven't committed to any of these things yet. Is that right?
Down the list, and we have not.
Well, Alpine Balsam is somewhat committed, but not completely committed.
Yeah, that may be a further discussion.
Yeah, that's next.
Well, true, but I just want to ask a question about Alpine Balsam while we're here. The subsurface and surface infrastructure component of that, will that end up being paid back if we have developers who are involved in a public-private partnership?
And while Chris is coming up here, just in looking at Alpine Balsam and anticipated expenses or costs, I didn't see anything for roads, for water, sewer, gas, if we would do that, electric, sidewalks, flood mitigation. Where is that?
Great. So Chris Meschuk, Interim Planning Director. I can answer both questions because they're actually the same question. So when we refer to subsurface infrastructure and surface infrastructure, that's what we're referring to is any of the connections through the site, subsurface meaning water, sewer, all that sort of thing. So depending on how we decide to partner or not partner with housing developers for the kind of area of the site that would be dedicated to housing. Our typical practice across the city is if there are additional new roads or infrastructure extensions, those are paid for by that private development. And so we could do that and do that same approach. What that, depending on how we decide to finance, how much of it is for affordable housing, there's some trade-offs that we would need to make on that. And the project team is examining those costs and helping us understand what might be the best business decision for us as a city to make in terms of how that infrastructure might get funded.
Great. And if we have mixed use, because the mixed use is another component of this, and presuming that the mixed use is likely not going to be affordable housing, would we recoup all of the expenses associated with the infrastructure for the mixed use projects?
Yeah, we would look at it similar to whatever portion of that site is going to be dedicated to that mixed use. So let's say that north east corner is kind of that flex parcel. Let's say in the end that becomes a mixed use development. Whatever infrastructure is that appropriate share for that parcel, that property would then share in that development.
Okay, so then we have a number here for the subsurface and surface infrastructure that will eventually be paid back. likely, at least part of it will.
Part of it could be, yeah.
Part of it, so that's another way of thinking about this that's a little less painful than the sticker shock from the number, because even if we front this number, which I assume is what's being talked about, would you front it, or would you wait until we had a site plan review?
That's actually part of the analysis that we're working on right now, is what's the trade-off decisions of should we front it and build all the infrastructure, essentially have pad sites ready to go for development, or do we want to time that infrastructure with the timing of whatever that ultimate development will be? And that's part of what we're working on putting together, and we will bring at the June 4th study session.
Thank you.
I don't like the use of the word pad. That I mean, that just brings the PTSD of this. Pads haven't worked out real well. So
I'll choose a different word.
Just saying.
Any other questions for Chris?
Yeah, what is happening to the pad? But
that's for a different day.
Bring me up to speed.
You guys, you still have Joel to be very engaging. Any other questions on these projects?
I do. So on the fire stations 2 and 4, the relocation, it was really difficult to find a place to relocate fire station number 3, and it's only getting more and more difficult. And by the time all's said and done with fire station number 3, we're looking at close to 15 million. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering about that estimate and how realistic it is to expect to find any land anywhere for a new fire station.
Great question. So it's hard to predict what we would find and what we wouldn't. We're looking even now. Even in the CU South discussions, which will have an impact on our services, we're talking about what shared possibility could exist there. But regardless, there's land that's not even for, this land that we actually got for Station 3 wasn't even for sale when we first actually inquired about it. So it's a tough market. For Station 3 in particular, that area you all know is a real hotbed of activity right now. So trying to find land in any area along the 30th Street corridor or even east and west of it was really, really difficult. It's not that it's going to be easy for Station 4 or Station 2, but I do think there are options if we're looking now and not just waiting to see what would happen. So we are exploring what properties may or may not be available at any point in the next 3 to 5 years. But obviously, we need a funding source to strike if an opportunity hits us. So I don't know if that means that in 3 to 5 years, we've missed it again, because this was a pretty big hit to go from $4.5 million estimate to 9. When we were first looking, it looked realistic at about 4.5. So I can't really say we're going to hit it perfectly, but I think what we've got in here right now is a fairly reasonable estimate for land and construction for the size of stations. We did increase the land acquisition costs, though, for all of the subsequent projects because of the experience with Station 3. I don't know if that helps or not, but it isn't going to be easy, of course, but we aren't waiting.
So that brings up the whole issue of why move. I mean, when I look at Broadway, and I'm not a firefighter, but when I look at Broadway and Balsam.
Could be, just saying.
I do volcanoes, yeah. When I look at Broadway and Balsam, it seems like a fine site. It is a busy intersection, so why not just use that site? And same with the Darley or Station 4.
Sure.
Why not just use those sites and make a new station on those, and then you can eliminate the costs of
I wish we could for both sites. In fact, if we could rebuild on all of the sites to expand what we need for those particular locations, we would. That's option number one every time. I'll go into both stations. Station 2 is a great location. It's at the right spot. The only challenge we have is that it hits right onto the main arterial, which is not ideal for fire station access. I get that when it was built, it probably was a lot less traveled 50 years ago, but what you try to do is you try to go on a side street and then access the main arterial. That station can't be expanded. It actually houses one unit, complement of 3 firefighters, can't put anything else in it. I have a wildland truck, but in order to get the wildland truck out of the station when something hits in the interface, we have to pull out the big truck, the regular truck, get it out of the way, and then move the wildland truck out, then put the other truck back in the bay. Obviously, that causes response time problems for us. So we can't expand the size of the bay. We cannot go up. We cannot do anything. We can't even respond out the back of the station. If you're familiar with it, there's actually an access that goes out the back, but we run into a problem with the walkway and the bike path right there, and we cannot drive out the back and onto there for a controlled intersection onto Broadway. So we can't use the backside of the station for response. We couldn't even do a back-to-back kind of thing. And we cannot use the station for any more personnel than it has today. It was built when there were actually 2-person fire companies at the time. That's 4, that's 2. 4 was a house.
Right.
And do you mind if I interrupt? But just, so that's at the current state, but in what way could you not reconstruct it? Like, so you have some access issues with the arterial, but presumably you could build something that was taller and fit,
That we can't do.
Okay,
So we can't
actually,
we can't build up and change the roof line of the station. We can't add out because it's at the property line right now.
And why can't you build up? I didn't understand.
So when we talked with planning, I don't know if we have somebody from planning here now, but when we discussed the option, it isn't an option for us to actually change the roof line on that structure. And I don't think it's a historical overlay. I think it's just an issue of being able to go up at that location. Station 4 as a house is maxed out on the lot that it is. There's nothing we can actually do to add onto it to actually add a unit to that station if we could. It barely fits the truck it has in there today and doesn't allow for any kind of wildland response.
So I have a process issue I want to raise with council. So we have another 40 minutes or so left on this discussion topic. And I'm looking at the questions here, and it looks like you've given us most of what we need to answer the questions. Would you agree with that? Or would you, I know you've got a longer presentation, but I've kind of gone through it, and a lot of it has to do with financial outlook for the city. And I get the sense from council that what we really want to talk about is kind of near-term decision-making that we need to do. Does council agree with that, or I'm happy to?
I do. I have one thing I wanted to bring up here and just get some.
Okay, and I think what I'm trying to make sure we have time for is for council to discuss once we've got questions answered. Yep.
Sam, just to follow up on that, there seems to be a fair amount of interest in the fire housing going forward. So perhaps we could get some kind of, if not now, at some point, more information on how some of these decisions were made, for example, planning, being the one driving the fire engine on this one.
Sure, and it seems to me like the only immediate, I'm just trying to make buckets, right? There's stuff that we can decide in the longer term, like 2 and 4. We're finding out information now. But 3, we really have to deal with. It's right in front of us. We have land built, so how we're going to, so I'm just trying to kind of use our time wisely so that we're setting ourselves up for this coming budget process and not doing long-term planning.
And that's what I'm saying, as long as, but it still needs to come back, the question.
Eventually, yeah.
Well, the information can be had, I would think, sooner.
So
some of these decisions.
Yes, we're diligently taking notes as I hear typing behind me. The plan is to send out an advanced study session summary like we do after study sessions tomorrow for your packet Thursday, outlining what items we're following up on and timeline. Some of these things that are kind of more informational can be certainly just done quicker in the regular study session summary, and some may come back during the budget process too, depending on the relevancy to it.
So Can I just ask this question? So line item number 19 is about the open space campus. And, you know, I started hearing rumors about this, and I don't ever, maybe I missed a IP or something, but I don't ever really remember the city council ever approving a $12 million campus for open space. And I don't know where that came from, and is that supposed to come out of open space funds?
The plan would be that it would come out of open space funds, and I know that they have been setting aside dollars to maybe the tune of $4 million aside, so
I
yes.
don't think when people voted for open space, they were thinking about building a campus. So I guess I'd like to put some brakes on that. And I guess I also am wondering, why are we rebuilding or having everything new? And I've been out to the Cherryvale campus a lot, and I know it's somewhat tight, but it's a cool campus. And so I don't know why we don't use what we have, why we have to rebuild everything, and why we don't do some cost-effective just expansion of our current facilities.
So we could ask Dan in the Open Space Department to provide more information. The buildings out there, and the reason that we left them is that they were dangerous for staff to be in.
Yeah, but yeah, I would like to get that information. I have a real problem spending $12 million on an open space campus facility. That just boggles my mind, and as just a voter, I never voted for open space funds so that we were building a campus.
Bob?
Good feedback, thanks.
Yeah, just kind of follow up on Lisa's point just now. This kind of feels like a wish list of everything that anyone could think of. And some of them are real high priorities that we're probably certainly going to do, and some of them are things that are probably way down on the list that we're not going to do anytime soon, or maybe never do, as Lisa just observed. So I think the next time we see this, it would be really, really helpful to have some degree of prioritizations. I think on that Capital Investment Strategy Committee that you appointed me to, Jane, back in 2011, we had like A's, B's, and C's or something like that, some sort of categorization, so we know this is my wish list. If money was no object, we'd like to do this, versus this is something we probably should do sometime in the next 5 to 10 years, versus this is something we really have to do now, because it's all kind of piled in here with a total of $205 million, and that's kind of a little unhelpful for us. I know Sam's been trying to unbundle.
I just really have to push back on that.
Okay.
In my view, this is not a wish list. This is a list of items that we have heard from a board or commission, we have heard from council members, we have heard from the community of things that people truly want. And we are coming to you to say, we can't afford all of this, and we need your help in telling us which ones to move forward with. And so there are plenty of wish list items that are not on this list. These are things that some important person in the city has really made an effort around. So the open space campus, when you say the word campus, it sounds like it's kind of highfalutin, but it wasn't the intent at all. The intent of that is to redevelop the old Cherryvale site so that it works for open space. The thought was that possibly it could be a community room out there. And there was also a thought about the Veely House, which is on the corner there, that could possibly be an open space museum, something like that. So they're starting to think about how to redevelop that important piece of property that we have. There's no sewer service out there right now, and we would need to work with the county to get this. And so there has been discussions, I believe, with the Open Space Board of Trustees about future ideas. But it's we're at least 5 years away from making that happen, and that's why we put it on this part of the list. But every single one of these items are things that we think we truly need or want, and they are significant items. But we may decide, you may decide, as you look ahead to the future of the next 5 years, well, no, the open space is in a really lovely location right now, and we don't need to do that. We're asking, help us figure out what it is you want to do in the next 5 to 7 years.
I guess what I was saying, Jane, maybe not articulately, is I don't see a staff recommendation here. I don't doubt that somebody somewhere in the city thinks that these are all good ideas. But what I'd like to hear from staff is, what do you think are the good ideas? In other words, tell us what's really, really important and what's kind of nice to have and what's kind of like we probably won't do. And I don't see that here. This is just like a list of like everything that anybody could think of, and that would be really helpful for some winnowing to happen. And I think it's going to be challenging for us to do that winnowing without a lot. I mean, you heard the long discussion we had on fire stations, and we could have long discussions at each of these items. And so without a lot more detail, we're not going to be able to make decisions. And I think the first step in that decision process will be for staff to come back and say, these are really important and these are not important. And then we can agree or disagree with you, but we don't have any prioritization here.
So let me make a suggestion just for the use of our time. I think these intermediate needs ones, we should probably take responsibility for asking the questions that we want about them on Hotline, but I don't think we're going to be making necessarily decisions in this budget cycle that are going to impact those. And what we need to make a decision about and guide staff tonight, most importantly on, is the near-term stuff. So I think it's good that we have this because it's a list that we can think about and ask about. But I think in the last half hour we have, I'd like to have us talk about the answers to the questions that staff brought out. Is that okay? And is it okay with you if we don't go through the rest of your presentation?
I'm happy to expedite it. I think setting context of what we saw come in year end would help you understand the financial capabilities going into 2020. But we can certainly breeze through some of those that are less important if that's okay.
Well, I just want to make sure we have time for council to have a discussion. And while we've asked questions and done a little bit of that, I think we need to dig deeper because I want to bring some.
I certainly don't think we need to do the same thing with the long term that we just did with the medium term. And as I look through the rest, if you want to briefly run through the funding situation, but we don't need a primer on how sales and use tax is put together.
That's what we just wrote down. Okay. So going into 2018 year end. Want to jump to this slide?
Good evening, Council. Joel Wagner, Tax and Special Projects Manager. So I'm going to run through these really briefly, and we'll focus on the year-end situation. So I won't get into all the definitions. Business use tax, go ahead and bring up the, we budgeted a base for this of $272 million for the ongoing needs for the 2020 budget. This, translates to about $10.5 million in sales tax. You can see that increased, that gap between the green and the blue lines there is your one-time needs or additional fund balance. Go ahead and go to the next one. It's important to point out that the 2017 increase, that peak there, was related to one voluntary disclosure, one voluntary payment by one business. Adjusting for that, 2017 use tax was really right at the base for the 2020 budget. Similarly, construction use tax started out during the Great Recession pretty low. It's recovered since then. It's bounced around a little bit. The important thing to point out with construction use tax is that most of this is paid when an individual or a contractor pulls a permit with the city. So by the time that you're seeing a hole in the ground or cranes in the air, this revenue has already been received and booked. Very high level. Retail sales, you can see we took this time scale out a little bit further. Since the recession, we've had some good recovery in this, having growth in the 2013s to 15 and the 2.5 to 3.5%. This stalled in 2017, but it recovered a little bit in 2019 at 2.8%. When we show retail sales, we also like to show this adjusted for the cost of inflation. We call this the buying power slide. So the difference between the blue line and the green line is consumer price index, so the inflation cost. So this just shows that as that gap is widening, that means that our retail sales growth, our total sales and use tax growth has grown at a rate that has oftentimes not matched CPI, not matched inflation. One thing I will point out on this one is that we're using consumer price index, and as you've heard from others throughout the night, construction costs have increased significantly. So if anything, this is a little bit underestimated there. Okay, so I'll cruise through this and I'm almost done. So year-to-date, sales and use tax, based on current economic activity, increased by $5.2 million, or 3.9%. If we include audit revenues, that was a $6.1 million gain, or 4.5%. Just a couple of highlights. Business use tax, which was actually trending in the 20s and 30s% through most of the year, ended up down by 8%, and this is due to that one large voluntary payment that I discussed a little bit earlier. Construction use tax did end quite strong at a 31% increase, or $3 million. So this next slide just breaks out that $6.1 million increase over 2017. And as Katie mentioned earlier, a little less than half of that goes to the general fund, with the remaining being split for dedicated uses, so open space, transportation, and smaller amounts for parks and recreation and the community culture safety tax. We spoke about these trends at length last year. We think that these still continue to be the main drivers, and those are competition from surrounding communities, competition from online sales, demographic shifts, most notably aging population, and this is the most concerning one for us. I'll talk about that a little bit. And then just retail mix within the city of Boulder, and we're working on the retail study to really examine this piece. Recommendations on, or the study and recommendations will be out later this year.
So Joel, we care about this largely because of tax issues in the budget discussion, right? What our revenue is. Online retail sales are now taxed, correct?
They are now beginning to be taxed at the state. Home rule cities have not moved on this. We're working closely with the Colorado Municipal League to coordinate how we approach this. The state has made it pretty clear that if any home rule city goes out on their own, they'll consider this a matter of statewide concern and kind of take matters into their own hands. That's a concern for home rule cities because that defines the base and other things, which we have significant concerns about, especially here in Boulder, where we tax certain things differently than the state does. So we're working towards it. We are seeing anecdotally businesses, out-of-state businesses, starting to get business licenses with us. I haven't seen a meaningful increase in 2019 related to that, but we only have 1 month of data. So we're monitoring it and we're seeing who's coming in. But at this point, we have some voluntary remitters, but we have not seen a big increase from that.
Okay, thanks.
So we worked with Phyllis Resnick. She's the lead economist for the Colorado Future Center at Colorado State University. She identified 3 major drivers in Boulder's revenues, and these are earnings, wealth, and then again, the share of population over the age of 65. The share of population over the age of 65 is the one that has the strongest statistical significance in her models. And the reason this is important is the state demographer's office has put out this chart showing the forecast for the age share of Boulder County residents over the age of 65. So older Americans tend to spend less on taxable goods and more on services and experiences. And so we're seeing a pretty strong driver of that in the projections. So Ms. Resnick came up with several models for us based on a baseline and an optimistic prediction for each of those 3 factors. And she came up with a range here you can see at the lowest at 0.9% growth and the highest at 3.8%. And the last column is the average, ranging in the 2 to 3%, and that's what we've used to inform our 2020 budget. One thing to point out about that last one is that did not include any potential recession. A lot of economists are predicting one in the next several years. Our current economic expansion will reach 10 years in mid-2019. The longest one since date has been 10 years. So Ms. Resnick modeled 2 scenarios, including essentially one mirroring the Great Recession and one about half the Great Recession, and you can see that here. The blue line is our baseline revenue projections. The 2 dips include a potential recession, and what you can see is that these never really catch up to the baseline. And that little dip there is where reserves would come in to continue core services when members of our community need it the most. This is not included in our budget, but we wanted to make sure that we share it and talk about it.
I think we'll skip this in the summary and go straight to council questions.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I will make one quick comment. We heard at the luncheon today an economist that was talking about the general economic consensus, which is about a 33% chance of a recession before the end of the year. So
It was Tucker Hart-Adams who made that prediction.
Yeah.
Such a recession would not be as great as what we experienced in 2008. And so it would be somewhat softer, and we could recover from that in a much quicker period.
Yep. Okay, so on to questions. Shall we go down one by one? Because I think these are pretty big questions, actually. So I would say, who wants to start off with the first question, which is what should the 2020 to 2022 budgets focus on if there are available resources? I think really that question is focused on the list and perhaps the slide that we were given that showed a staff suggestion, which is back on slide 24 of the presentation, which is the layout of funding approaches for this. And I know that Mirabai has to leave at 9 o'clock, right? So if you, yeah. So you want to, okay, that's helpful. I'll ask the question then. So the first question is, of the immediate and intermediate projects discussed, and I think we should just focus on the immediate ones, is my comment. The intermediate ones are, we saw what that could lead us to. So what should we focus on in this list?
So I want to start off with the big elephant in the room, and that's Alpine Balsam. And I am really wondering if we should continue in the path that we're going on. And if it might not, I mean, it just is, I was one of 4 council members that are on council now. When we originally bought that, we never anticipated the expenses that are in there right now. I mean, honestly, I thought we would reuse the hospital and then we would sell off the rest of the land so that we had control basically on what was developed there. But as we continue to go down this path, I think we're digging a hole we're not going to get out of. And I'm wondering if we should just call it good and get rid of that. And that's the big elephant that's in front of us. And I mean, we spent $40 million plus for that. We now have $58 million estimate to redo the pavilion. We have the numbers always move. We have $16 million now to deconstruct the hospital. We have another untold amount in terms of soil remediation, abatement. I'm still not sure in terms of how much funding is for the surface and subsurface. I can't remember that amount. But it is far more than I think any of us anticipated. And I think we call it good and get out and try to sell that property ASAP on best possible conditions. So that's what I want to start the discussions on. I think we've gotten in, number one, having been on that council, the idea of it came up at the very end, and it was quickly pulled together, and I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. I think everybody tried to work together on this. I think people saw it as an incredible opportunity, but honestly, it was done so fast, we didn't do our due diligence, and we didn't, and again, I'm not pointing fingers because the buck stops here at the council, and the council voted for this. But I do think we should stop and get out of it, and I'll just leave it at that. I think it's just gotten way over what we anticipated, and we're putting the lion's share of our funds in the short term into this thing that's just going to take more and more and more. And I'll just make a comment. And this has to do some with some of Bob's. And in looking, and again, it's not pointing fingers or anything, everybody, and I really appreciate you people putting this together so that we see full front, how much money, it's close to $500 million is what we're talking about. And what really kind of jumped out at me was that there were all these buildings and city building needs, and very little put into residents' needs. And somehow that needs to be balanced. We continue, and I'm a big housing advocate, but as we continue to add housing to what we have here, we have to add services. We can't be behind on services like libraries, parks, different kinds of services that people anticipate come in paying their taxes. So somehow, the next iteration of this has to have residents' needs in there with city needs. And I'll just leave it there, but let's get out of Alpine Balsam.
Well, I'll just sort of add on. I wasn't on the council that voted to buy this, so I'm out of that part of it. But it is a rather shocking number for city staff offices, particularly when on line number 31 in the intermediate needs, we are sort of postponing $1.3 million for Vision Zero needs. And as I drive around the city and look at the potholes, much less the state of our bike lanes, some pedestrian access and such, and see that this isn't one of our primary things right in front of us, it's surprising. And I agree with what Lisa says, and particularly something like this, which has to do with the safety of the people on the streets in all of their different modes. And it's a mere 1.3 million, as opposed to these many millions that have just stacked up. So as a relatively new council member, recycling through, that's just sort of my 2 bits on that.
Aaron?
Yeah, thank you for that, Cindy, because I agree that the safety of our residents needs to be high up on the priority list, and so that those Vision Zero efforts, I think, are extremely important. And I do feel like we need to pay more attention to the state of our streets. I know it's the end of the winter season and you get freeze thaw, and so it's a peak time for potholes, but looking around as I walk and bike and drive around the city, I feel like we're not fully maintaining our infrastructure that we have, and I think we need to devote more resources to like the pothole filling and things like that, some of those basic services. Lisa, thank you for calling out the elephant in the room. I've been getting increasingly concerned with the dollar figures involved in the hospital. I was not on the council that purchased it, but I'm not pointing any fingers either. And so I don't know what the exit path would be, but I think we need to explore it because I think fundamentally, when I look at the resources required, the dollar amounts, the city resources of time and effort and such like that, I'm not seeing us getting the amount of value to the city that we will need to put in terms of dollars and resources. So I think it needs exploring.
Bob?
I'll just go down the line and agree with my colleagues. I just did some quick math here. Alpine Balsam alone on both the immediate and intermediate, if you add it all up, it comes out to 75 million. And that's 75 million out of 250 if you add up the intermediate and immediate columns. So it's almost a third of the amount of money we're talking about spending in the next 5 or 6 years. And I agree that these numbers continue to surprise me, particularly the $58 million on the pavilion building, and the deconstruction cost seems to continue to escalate. So I don't want to declare that I want to necessarily dispose of the Alpine Balsam property, but I think we need to have a big step back, deep dive, and talk about what we're doing here.
Nearby. Oh, I'm sorry. Mayor?
So I will echo what's been said. And I just wanted to point out that item number 10 on the immediate needs is dealing with streets and potholes. So I do think that there is something, and we can certainly prioritize that. And I agree with the sentiment that we need to kind of look and see what are basic fundamental services that we need to be providing to make sure that it's a safe community. And so I'm in agreement, and I am also in agreement of we need to kind of step back a little bit on Alpine Balsam and let's see what our options are, because the numbers are staggering. To look at just 15 million for deconstruction of a building is just outrageous. So perhaps we, maybe we sell, maybe we put it on a longer time horizon. I don't know what the options are, but I think we need to explore them. And that would certainly open it up for other things that we could prioritize.
Nearby.
So I guess I'll jump on the bandwagon here. My one concern, if we did let go of Alpine Balsam is control, in terms of what we can control right now and how the outcome looks. I mean, again, I understand the monetary side is staggering and extremely concerning. For me, control is a really big issue, though, too. So I just want to make sure that we're not getting, if we do sell it or whatnot, it doesn't end up to be boxes of high density that doesn't serve the community and is just another ugly building in Boulder. So that's just my one point on that. And then my question to staff, and I could just be missing it in here. So if we were to somehow get out of Alpine Balsam, we need 2 other buildings that are currently being rented. They need to be renovated. Is there an amount there? Because, I mean, some of the money there that we were going to go towards Alpine Balsam could then go to Brighton and whatever the other building is. But I'm curious what those, okay, I'm curious what those 2.
So if you look at lines 21 and 22, that would be the rental space needed for the capacity of New Britain and Park Central if the pavilion is not built. That's an annual cost. It's important to note, both in the memo and I believe in a IP that was sent out, that if you span that dollar amount out, it actually, to remodel, pays itself back versus the cost we would to have lease. It just would take time to do that. So those are your 2 weighing options, the smaller upfront cost or over time, the fact that we would be paying more in lease space.
Sure.
But those 2 buildings do need to be
fixed one way. It's just it's what's feasible for us.
Not even fixed.
Unfortunately, yeah, it obviously is smarter to have our employees be in our property-owned buildings, but at the same point, if we don't have the money, $75,000 just to, or $75 million just to start, we may have to do it the other way and just have it unfortunately be that way. So it's a give and take of what we can do with our money. So I
just
guess,
want to understand something. Are you done?
Yeah.
I want to understand what you just said. The $2.8 million is a comparison to $58 million. In other words, $2.8 million annual versus $58 million capital on the preserving the pavilion building.
Well, the $58 million, it would be the $72 million that we're proposing that you would bond for, which would be about a $4 million payment. So that would be the comparable, is $4 million annual payment for a bond versus $2 million in rent.
How do we borrow $72 million and pay only $4 million? That doesn't even amortize over 20 years. That doesn't, the math doesn't.
It was over 30 years, and I think it's
30 years.
30.
Not 70.
It was 58 million. 58 versus 28. Yeah, so that's a 4% cost. I mean, if you factor in the time value of money, we actually never get our money back, right? In other words, 4% on 58 million is $2.8 million roughly. And so we would never actually get our money back. I mean, that's the fallacy of repayment, which is just take your gross number and divide it by your smaller number and say, oh yeah, we get paid back in 27 years, whatever, but it ignores the interest cost at the time value of money, right? So if you assume time value of money is 3 or 4% to us, you actually never get your money back.
So
can I just,
please.
There was one last thing, and Lisa, you were saying that you wanted to see it more balanced with the community, but I don't know, I kind of feel like it, just with as much focus as we're putting on life and safety, well, I mean, I guess it technically comes down to life and safety with our fire departments. I mean, it does seem like we're trying to focus a lot on providing that service. So, I mean, to me, it's, I think there is a balance.
Right, and I think public safety is very important to our community, but I think also amenities, like parks. I mean, Sam and I did, we were assisted by Sarah Huntley, and we did a council chat the other day. So, and we had a really good turnout, and there were lots of people there talking about roads, talking about parks and recs, talking about different
those type
things.
of, okay, I was going with life and safety, so.
Great. Well, I just want to remind us of a couple of things here really quickly. First of all, there has been a pretty nice analysis done, as long as the numbers haven't moved too much, of what the payback time is for renovating versus renting. And so that's all pulled together into place. Maybe staff could mail that memo back out to all of council on hotline again, because I think it's worth reviewing, because that buy build question is something that we did take a look at. The other thing,
So I can say that actually, although that analysis did not include the time value of money, there was no discount rate applied.
we could ask for, or we could actually put it in pretty easily, but yeah, it didn't. But then if you put the time value of money in, it's probably going to be close to a wash. And at the end of the day, we then own the property. So there's a residual value question as well. But regardless of, I don't disagree that we should be looking closely at Alpine Balsam, because it's a huge, contributor. It's a choice that we're having to make. I'll point one other thing out, though, about Alpine Balsam. There's a few reasons we made the decision we did. $40 million was not something taken lightly in the first place, but it was land banking, right? The whole idea was that we could effectively control the outcomes that we got there, not just from a design perspective, but from an amount of affordability perspective. So it was done for good reasons. Another thing is, some of the costs that are being shown as going in there, like the infrastructure costs and so on, will come back. So this is something where we're putting dollars in. We'll get those dollars back for the infrastructure, but we'll also probably do what we're doing at Pollard and sell off property to developers that's ready or close to ready to develop. And so we're going to be getting money coming back in for those as well. So as we do this, these dollar figures promote sticker shock for sure, but we should think about, that's why I thought the question's about how to spread it out, right? So the $4 million a year interest costs was for some portion of that we're spreading out, probably for the pavilion building, but it's similar for the rest of the expenses that go in, is if there's a way to spread them out and then recoup them, there's still value, I think, in being able to control what ends up at that site. Because if we just let it go, and we could turn around and sell it, maximize what we get, then it's really just going to be a matter of the site plan review process and maybe any area plan that we get in there. And the amount of affordable housing will just be dictated by, the linkage fees and the inclusionary zoning. So I think we should be careful about just yanking it. We should be thoughtful about it, and we should have staff come back and offer, okay, if we turned around and sold it, what would that look like? In other words, would there be losses? If so, how much would they be? So I think it's a really complex question, and the part that I keep coming back to is there will be money coming back in to replace the money that has to go out. We just need to figure out when and how much.
Yeah, so I think that's true. But I think we need to actually have a public hearing and a business meeting on Alpine Balsam. We bought that in late 2015. We have yet, at least in my memory, had a public hearing about it. And I revisited the November 13, 2018, and these were study sessions. And if you read that memo, it says council gave direction. We do not give directions at study sessions. This is a point I brought up year after year after year. We make our decisions in business meetings, not in study sessions. So I think staff is unclear, we're unclear, and I would just ask any Alpine Balsam thing that comes back, I don't want a study session. I want a actual hearing, and I want a place where council can legally direct staff to do X, Y, and Z. I think the staff to date has done a great job, and they've worked hard on this. So again, I'm not pointing fingers, but I went back through all of our study sessions, and they're getting this direction that shouldn't be happening at study sessions. It should be happening in our business meetings. So I'll just make that comment.
Bob?
One thing that might be helpful, however we revisit this, and it is revisiting, I agree with you, Sam. It would be helpful, I think, to unbundle the things that are time sensitive. In other words, whether to sell the land or not, there's not much expense. There's an ongoing interest expense. I don't want to minimize that, but I think the big decision we have to make here is whether and how to deconstruct, because I think the hospital's moving out here in a few weeks, and I think the staff is ready to move forward with deconstruction per our earlier instructions. And so the pavilion building, I think, is the biggest swing in that. In other words, they're going to deconstruct a certain way if the pavilion building's staying up, and they're going to deconstruct in a completely different way if the pavilion building's not sticking around. And I think staff needs to know that now, right? I think whether we sell the land, the underlying land or not, is a different discussion and doesn't really cost us anything. And I agree with you, Sam, it's land banking. So I think that's a different decision, sell versus not sell versus how we deconstruct. And I think staff's going to need to know on deconstruction, even before the 2020 budget. I think they need to know like now, because like bulldozers are rolling here this summer. And so I think they need to know.
Well, no, bulldozers are not running. We're going to secure the site.
Okay, but soon.
It takes months to get ready. And of course, part of the extra cost here is that we're deconstructing it in a sustainable manner. And so there's lots of get ready time. And so we're in the get ready time.
And I will note that this proposal to exhaust 2018 excess fund balance is another way of saying you will see this in the first adjustment to base, which comes before you May 7th. And there is a public hearing scheduled for that. So we could separate out and have this be kind of a separate piece.
Yeah, and I think
in addition to the regular.
And Bob, I think from my understanding of it so far, it seems pretty clear that the pavilion building should be reused. I think whether another story gets added to it is a little more discretionary. But I kind of what I've heard from the staff analysis is the main hospital really has to go, but you really want to keep the pavilion building, whether you're selling it or using it for city offices. I think it has more value kept than, is that?
Would we like to have?
It's complicated because if we are keeping the pavilion building and taking down the hospital, there are, I think, two sides of the building that are just open. And so we have to close those up. And so that's part of the cost. So we can provide more information and revisit the difference between keeping it or not.
Okay. Mary?
Well, so it seems like what we're asking for here right now is some options as to how we can address our concerns and the big ticket items having to do with Alpine Balsam. So one of the concerns I've heard so far is the issue of, well, if we're not controlling what goes on there, what's going to happen? And that could be a big concern for the community. So there are things that we might be able to do to maintain some semblance of control, for example, form-based code. So to look at things like how could we address the issue of control is what are our options there? How can we address the issue of the big ticket item? Well, maybe we sell off parcels and it's timed in such a way that works out with addressing the big expenses with the pavilion. So I think this is going to take some thought, and I think it's going to be a process in and of itself. But it sounds like the deconstruction does need to happen.
Yeah, and if I could just weigh in, I was just looking today at the November study session, and I get it, the basement is unusable. I'm still not convinced that it does need to be deconstructed. And the first floor is 92,000 square feet, and the second to fourth floor, we have 163,000 square feet. I get it, there's all this wiring, there's lead shields, there's copper shielding, there's all of this stuff, but I don't know why it just can't be wrapped and used. And I know I'm a minority voice on this, but it makes no sense to me to take down something. I mean, it's one reason I didn't vote for 311. It's a hospital, and they build hospitals like they build ships, and they're usually very well constructed. And to say that you can't repurpose one of those hospital rooms, I've been in that hospital many times, and you know, many of those rooms have either their own private bath or they share it with the next door. And there's a lot of different types of housing that could be accommodated here without taking this building down. But I do think we need to look at this in much more detail. And when I just did just a simple little math thing, because when asked to take 14 million out of this excess fund balance, so I just started after the deconstruction, which is in here at 15.2, but we know it's much closer to 16. And I just added lines 3 through 11, just, you know, just in sequence, and that comes to 15.4 million. And I would much rather spend my money on $15.4 million on all of these different items, 3 through 11, than put into deconstructing this hospital. So I'm not, I'll just say I'm not there with using this excess fund balance for deconstructing the hospital.
When we come back, we can provide more information about what it would cost to keep the hospital and renovate it. Our early estimates are that it will be $175 million, which is a bit more than what we're talking about here.
No, and I understand that, but I wonder, you know, again.
So Lisa, I appreciate your point here, but I think what we need to ask staff for is what we want to see next to be making decisions. And so I think we've given staff a lot of questions that we want to see answered before we go forward. Cindy?
I have a tangential. Since Lisa brought up 311 and Mary brought up form-based code and having the ability to control, what happened to 311? I mean, we haven't gotten any reports on the things that council asked to have happen to that at the end of the plan.
So let's have that as a request to staff. Yep. It's completely separate from this. Okay. Yep.
I just wanted to make one more comment on a separate item, which Lisa brought up about the North Boulder Library branch, which is currently kind of one of the unfunded needs out of many, 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 including a number in the library. I mean, I just would like to make my intention clear and get this out there that we don't know exactly the funding mechanism, but that there would be an intention from council that once that building is completed, that we actually run it and operate it. And so I would like to see that move from the unfunded column into the plan to be funded column, and start planning for that now, whatever that looks like.
Absolutely.
Yep. Mary?
And one of the things that I'd just like to make sure gets addressed is that in the columns where we're looking at the costs, that we're looking at all apples or all oranges. It seems like things were mixed, and it was really confusing.
Yes.
So that would be very much appreciated.
I believe that request came across clearly to staff. Is that correct? Yep. Okay. So let's see if we look at the questions specifically. Let's look and see if we've answered them. Of the immediate and intermediate, what should the focus be? Well, what we've said so far is Alpine Balsam is questionable in the current state, which draws into question the expenses for it in the near term. So I think we've answered that in the sense that staff knows it's an issue and we're going to need to see options, but it's going to have a big impact on the budget, you know. So it seems like that decision, what we're hearing from council, needs to be reconsidered, and it probably does have to be. I mean, the budget time frame is out to October, and so we need to schedule in some additional scenarios and information on Alpine Balsam. Does that sound fair to council? Okay, good. So that's one of the parts of the answer to the first question. And then the other parts of the answer to the first question are, Aaron?
North Boulder Library branch.
Yeah, no, we got that, and that was actually in the intermediate, right? That it'd be operational funding available for it, and so that's still a little further out, right? So it's not in the 2020 budget, which is what we're really trying to think about here. So what do we want to say besides Alpine Balsam? Do we want to hold fire on the other kind of near-term questions? Are there any of them that any council members want to say this I mean, I'm going to say that I think Station 3 work needs to be funded. It's a health and safety issue. It's a life safety issue. It's something we planned for a long time, and we're in process on it. So from my standpoint, the Station 3 work needs to move ahead. Does anybody disagree with that? Okay, so there's a few pieces of clarity.
Yeah. So I just wanted to reiterate what Lisa, and I think Cindy brought up earlier too, is to focus or to balance more on the community needs and wants rather than other things that might be nice to haves that are more having to do with office buildings and things like that. So to balance more what makes safety and health and safety of the community with the needs for to keep an engaged and great staff too, because that's necessary and essential as well.
Well, and I think that would, I mean, being that it's on the immediate, I mean, that Long's Garden, I think would be a perfect example of that. So I hope that we could figure out some way of whether or not we use the one-time funds of the $4 million and then transfer them over to the general fund, or if we can work out a program where they don't need all the money right away. But I think that would be a huge benefit to secure for our community.
So maybe we want to be methodical and go down the line, and one way to do that would be to prioritize 1, 2, or 3, the things that we're looking at. I don't know if we want to go into that level of detail, but it's a relatively short list, right? It's
It's hard to do that when the numbers we're looking at are apples and oranges.
Well, I don't think they are on the first short term. I wasn't suggesting we go into the medium term at all. I was just asking for how would you like to do that? So we have this list of short-term possibilities. We're suspending for the moment Alpine Balsam until we get more information. So for me, as I look down, I see there are some things that are relatively inexpensive and people have been working on for a long time and fit into that community needs, like the sister cities, display area and plaza as an example. I think we should also prioritize the fire records management system, because that was something staff suggested and because it's a life safety type of issue.
But is that immediate? I mean, in terms of risk management, is that something?
Yes, it is immediate. We must do it.
This is planned also to come before you in the first adjustment base in May. That's how immediate it is.
So just going on to these life safety issues, I mentioned streets, roads.
Mm-hmm. That's here. So if we look at, I forget which number it is.
Number
10.
Number 10. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
well, right.
I agree with that. Personally, I view that as life safety and very important. I almost crashed on a pothole last night, so.
I said this earlier, but I really feel like we need to pay more attention to the condition of our streets. I think that's a high priority that's not being paid enough attention to right now.
Crosswalks, everything, striping.
Yep. I would point out, and we've said this, but just since we're summarizing, kind of looking at this, I don't think the middle income housing support needs to be here at $3 million. I think we can do it off budget, so I would take it completely off of this, provided that we can. Doesn't mean stop the project. It just means there's another source of funding I think is available for this. How important is the municipal court software replacement at $750,000?
So again, all of the technologies are at the end of their life cycle. So if we don't have it, they're unsupported.
Oh, right, it's unsupported.
I would actually.
Do we have a way to make sure that doesn't happen again? I mean, we should be paying into some kind of a fund every year.
Yep, we will be
anticipating
beginning to pay into our internal service fund. That's the computer and software replacement fund.
this. So that'll need to come back because that'll be part of the budget. So how much that is?
It would be a lot smaller dollar amount, spread over, just depending on the life cycle, anywhere between 7 to 10 years.
And then there's item 9, it's $36,000 for.
536,000.
Isn't it 36,000? Is
536.
Oh, it's the eyeballs.
So another couple questions then on 8, which is radio services infrastructure. Is that an immediate need too?
If you want to, not get in the situation that you're in with the other pieces of
that's what that's
technology,
for, yeah.
This would be a best practice to put away funds so that when the time comes for replacement, you're not looking at a $10 million ticket.
And didn't we pass that in the cultural and safety?
You pass the replacement, this would be to fund the ongoing portion of it to replace it when it comes up next without going back out to voters.
This is
for
the
a big lump sum.
prepayment that you're asking for. So this is the first payment of the type of prepayment that you're asking for. And so, Mary, to your point, I view number 9 as being the kinds of services and amenities. It's the preservation of the level of service at the library.
No, I agree. That's one of those, yes.
So, and I think, Mirabai, to your point, the Long's Garden thing should be continued forward, but a multi-year payment would be a way to do that. And so I don't know that we want to select a $4.8 million one-time payment right now. So maybe we.
No, and I agree with that. It's my understanding that the estimate the new appraisal hasn't come back yet, and that the Longs family is pretty flexible on how that is parsed out. So all of that could be worked out, and there's also some potential funding that could come from GOCO funds. So there are different things to consider on that one, and needs more discussion before we add it. But I agree with Sam, it can go forward, but with knowing that there's things to be worked out.
Yeah, that's exactly was my hope.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense to keep moving it forward, but don't say 4.8 million this year, right? Yeah.
So I have a question about the living wage increase. Is that just to keep up with what we implemented?
No.
Was that 2017? Or?
Well, I thought that it was, Katie, so you know better than I.
Kind of. So what we had implemented in 2017, we said that we would come back during the budget process if the self-sufficiency standard was updated. They anticipate updating it every couple of years. And in December, they released their report updating it for Boulder County. And based upon preliminary analysis, the minimum wage or the living wage of $15.67 has increased. And so if we were to continue on the path of following that standard, at that mechanism that we calculated back in 2016, it could be anywhere from $1.5 million to maybe $2 million when you look at a range based upon preliminary analysis.
And just refresh my memory on how we deal with that. It's not just the people who make the minimum wage. It's adjusted for everybody somewhat accordingly. Is that correct? Or
yeah, so there's two different pieces of it. So there could be that you just want to, given the fact that we're in this compensation analysis citywide to look at market rates, you could just say, let's just bring everyone up to that base pay, right? So everyone that's $15.67 now comes up to the new rate. It does cause compression and equity issues, which is what you're saying is that the next step. Yeah, next step of it, and that's where you start talking in the higher dollar amounts of $1.5 to $2 million.
Yeah, so I mean, I think if somebody could come back with that type of analysis, and I guess I would, not being in employee relations or unions, I would like to know a little bit more about compression and how, I mean, we got that originally, but we've gotten a lot of other stuff too.
if I could make a comment here, I have a little spreadsheet going, and if we defer Alpine Balsam and we eliminate middle-income housing and we have Long's Garden, which is an ongoing process, which may result in payments, that leaves about 25 million in short term, which is about how much money we have. Now, I don't know how it breaks down into long, one time and ongoing.
Look at column 3, you'll notice a lot of those are ongoing. And the one-time draw is the 14 million. So just as a reminder, there's balance between the one-time and ongoing tools that you can use.
Yeah, I'd like to think about that a little bit, but I would just say, and I'm not saying that we're going to decide it here, but I would just say that with those changes, we have a closer budgetary match, and I'll let you figure out like what that means and is there a way to rejigger the different buckets of money that we have to meet that. And I'm not summarizing for council that we think Alpine Balsam is off the table, the deconstruction. We just need more time to think about that.
And on a different point that you brought up earlier, I think it is probably time to make marijuana funding ongoing rather than one time. I know we still get the same amount of money, right? But if it's ongoing, then it's flexible. You can either use it for something every year or you can dedicate it to one-time funds. So I'd like to go ahead and see us get that budgetary flexibility. What is it, 30-odd states that have some form of marijuana, and how many have recreational now? And it seems pretty safe.
Yeah, I agree. We look at this every year, at least for the past several years, to determine whether it was time. And this time last year, there was a lot of consternation around what federally was going to be done. So we were safe and kept it in one time.
So I think we've covered the first bullet at least well enough and then let's look at the second bullet. Any other priorities? And I think what that means is outside of anything we've discussed already tonight.
Well, so do we have operating for North Boulder?
Well, you've mentioned it several times, so.
Hey, I just wondered.
So I think it's clear that there's going to be an appetite for having that in the future budgets after it's constructed. Anything else? Is council comfortable with the continued goal of 20% reserves by 2020? Yeah, I've never been that comfortable with it, but we're almost there, and we're going to take a step back with the muni stuff that has been talked about. So, I guess.
I would say I'm comfortable with it if it's flexible, if everyone realizes it's not set in stone, particularly since these other entities, departments have their own reserves as well, as we learned.
Anybody else?
I just have to say that I think reserves in a time of climate change are pretty important.
I agree, Mary, but what I was referring to specifically, unless I'm misremembering, is that utilities had enough in their reserves to take care of the 2013 event. So a lot of those funds were, and then what the city had was over and above, or the general fund, I should say.
But that's, I mean, I agree, but we were ready to go. And you look at the county was not ready to go. And that's because they don't have the reserves that we have. And we were ready to go.
But again, they did come out of the enterprise fund. So all I'm saying is that if it is a 20% reserve in the general fund, that it needs to be flexible.
Yeah, and I think that flexibility also says that when opportunities arise, it's not only when crises arise, I think it's also when opportunities arise, as long as we try and build it back up.
Yeah, I still think it's really important to consider that climate events could make it such that you don't climb back out. And I think we need to keep that in mind.
Okay. Any further questions about the financial outlook? So I think this gets to the last part of the presentation about looking forward, revenue, aging population. Do we have any comments for staff on that? I think you can see it coming just as much as we can, so.
Well, I just have one comment is the retail study is going to come before us, and I think that that may have some influence on the next time we look at the budget. So I think that'll be an important piece.
Well, and I was interested in some of the things that Joel said about out of state and doing retail and adjusting our taxes accordingly, but we can't do that yet, and we're working with the Colorado Municipal League. And so that's been like a 2 decades long, at least, discussion, and I would hope that we keep our eye on that, and I'm sure we are, and work with the municipal league to make sure that that outcome happens.
Just to be clear, we do get some online sales taxes. I don't want anybody to walk away thinking we get none of it and we haven't gotten around to figuring it out. I think, for example, much of what Amazon sells, we get paid sales tax for, right? Not necessarily everything, but much of what they sell.
Correct. Amazon and a few other large businesses are registered and aren't voluntarily remitting the sales tax. And we are working very closely with the Colorado Municipal League. Carl Castillo is very much monitoring this, as well as the sales tax staff. And the goal is to have something implemented that works and doesn't violate the Commerce Clause and benefits us for the long term.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'll just make one last comment.
Oh, please.
When I first came on, we had less than a 2% reserve. So I have to say our staff has done an incredible job at increasing that reserve, and previous councils and this council, and increasing it. And we're in a fat and happy stage, not as fat as we would like to be, never. But I just appreciate the being conservative with our budget. And it's a much better place to be in than I found ourselves in when I first came in 95 and realized we didn't even have 2% reserve.
Okay, anyone else? Thank you, staff.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I just want to kind of end with that while this is seemingly shock and awe, it is an introduction to a conversation that's going to be iterative over the coming months and years. And so it's just meant to take all of the pieces that you've heard in various study sessions or public hearings and put it in front of you so we can start to game plan to make us sustainable and long term. So thank you for bearing with us, and we'll have a lot of follow-up that you'll be seeing.
Thank you.
Okay, on to the second part of the study session.
I have lots of friends, I said it.
Thanks. I was emceeing the keynote.
We don't have any council left.
What's that? Yeah,
So Chris and Melissa are not coming?
Chris emailed me about 5 and said he has emergency childcare, and I'm working with the other.
Okay.
But Ron's here.
Ron's here?
I'm here.
Yes.
All the cool kids are here.
Hey. I kind of live here.
I've heard that about you.
That's where I sit.
Secretly, people talk about that bed you made in your office, and you think no one knows about, but we do.
Actually lost everybody.
Yeah, we finished up while you were gone, so
Yeah, good.
it's all good. You know, if you guys want to sit at the table, you're welcome to. You don't have to sit back there. You're going to be on TV regardless.
Well, I don't mind. I took a shower and everything.
TMI. Yeah.
Fantastic, how are you? Yeah? I don't know why.
Why am I swamp?
I know why you're tired. I don't know how you guys do it. Thanks for dumping it. But I'm just thinking of the legacy.
You figure you'll have a few more weeks to grab the headlines.
That's right. Hanging out? Had a free night? We all get to go on a trade-out tour together. I mean, so much togetherness. For me, Dallas remains. This one wasn't tough, in large part because we had but I would also say that the quality of the recommendations. Yeah, I think that, when President Trump was started about it, and felt like she was just I mean, I've seen it both ways. I've seen the, I'm sorry, I'm an expert, so you're saying it's stupid, but I've also seen, oh, I'm going for a people that, like, I just, overwhelmed and fun. We had some really good conversations. Yeah. And the gal who's real friend of mine is out of town tonight.
Ready to go? Yep. Okay. So this is a continuation of the study session. This is the report of the Sexually Violent Predators Working Group. With us tonight is the fabulous Heather Bergman, who facilitated the group. Also Ron Gossage, Commander Ron Gossage, who was a representative of the group. We had two other members who were planning to attend. One had an emergency this evening and couldn't attend. The other one we haven't heard from. So we're hoping that they can come by, that one of them can come by, but this may be it. And of course, Chief Test is here as well, if you have any questions for the chief. So at the end, I'm going to ask you these questions about the recommendations and implementations of a non-consensus recommendation. But I'll give you some background first. I'll walk you through the recommendations and then come back to the questions. I just wanted to make sure you'd seen them up front before we got into the presentation. And considering the hour, I will try to do this as quickly as possible while trying to do justice to the hard work of this working group, which was an excellent group of individuals who devoted a significant amount of time to this effort. So just give you some history. You may recall that when Christopher Lawyer, who was a violent rapist who committed a stranger rape in Boulder, who many people remembered, was released into the community, a lot of the community was very concerned, particularly when he ended up living at the homeless shelter. And so that created a community conversation about how we deal with sexually violent predators, and particularly since we seem to be seeing more of them, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So this is a history of council's involvement. There was not a 5 to go forward. There was a discussion, as you recall, principally focused on whether or not there should be residency restrictions, that is, distances from parks or daycare centers or things like that, as some other communities, I believe 4 other communities in Colorado have adopted. The council had 2 public hearings, and in January of 2018 appointed a working group. The working group met throughout 2018 and issued its final report in December. And because of the press of council business, this is the first chance we've had to present the report to you. This is a list of the working group members. It was an interesting group. I had the honor of being the staff member supporting it along with Ann Large. As you can see, it's diverse, a lot of professionals. This is very difficult subject matter, and a lot of things are counterintuitive. We had very strong community representation and some really good discussions. A lot of the process, though, was educating those of us who don't necessarily work in this area about the difficult issues that are faced when you deal with sexually violent predators. So just a real quick overview of sex offender registration, and particularly sexually violent predator. This is really a notification provision. The idea is that when you have someone who's dangerous in your community, you have a right to know about it, which is, as far as it goes, a very good thing. The challenge is that there isn't a whole lot that you can do about it. And the communities tend to get frustrated when you tell them, we're putting somebody in your community who we believe is dangerous, but there's really not much you can do. And so that's a challenge. So the first sexually violent predator law was adopted in 1994 after the rape and murder of a young woman named Megan Konka. It was during the Clinton administration. It requires a registration with local enforcement. Depending on the offense, registration can be 5, 10, 20 years, or even life. Sexually violent predators register for life, but can be petitioned to remove from the list. And this is a very important point. Registration can exceed the period of post-release supervision. And what I mean by that, this is something we had a lot of trouble getting our heads around. Generally, when you're released from prison, you're on parole. And so if you're on parole and you violate, you go back. And so basically what the courts do is they say, when you get a sentence of, say, 20 years and you get released early, 10 years, they have 10 years to actively supervise your reintegration into the community and hopefully prevent you from reoffending. Since sexually violent predator designation can be for life, often sexually violent predators are no longer on parole. So what that means is the state has no supervisory authority over them at all. They can't tell them what to live. They can't tell them what to do. They can't monitor them. So a lot of the things we talked about in the context of a Christopher Lawyer, who was, of course, out on parole and therefore was subject to state supervision, are important, but it's more problematic as we get to the aging population of sexually violent predators who are going to be out with no state supervision at all. So it is a very challenging thing, and one that, as I said, we spent a lot of time learning about. And so this is a quick definition of a sexually violent predator. They have to be convicted of sexual assault, unlawful sexual conduct, or sexual assault of a child by position of one of trust. The victim was a stranger or the offender promoted the relationship for the purpose of victimization, who, based on a risk assessment, is likely to reoffend. And so one of the things we learned very much about that is that that is more of an art than a science. And courts initially were more likely than not to make the determination that someone was likely to reoffend, because of course they're predicting the future and nobody knows the future. There are approximately 800 sexually violent predators in Colorado. This data is probably a little bit stale, but not all that stale. 542 are incarcerated, 7 on life sentences with no parole. So the importance of this data, though, is that as you see, with the average sentence is 35.6 years, they're going to start more and more start getting out. And so, we were sort of shocked when we had more than one at the shelter, and suddenly we had 4. And people were just sort of up in arms. How could that be happening? Well, what's happening is when you put in something 20 years ago and you have an average sentence of 35.6 years, people start getting out. And so you have more and more. And it is incredibly difficult to house a sexually violent predator. Most people won't rent to them. They have trouble getting jobs. So a lot of them end up as homeless. And as you'll see when I give you the data here, the data for Boulder, currently data for Boulder, we have 116 sex offenders are currently registered in the city of Boulder, 3 of whom are sexually violent predators, 2 list the homeless shelter as their registration address. So it's a continuing problem of finding a place. And if you ask the police department, they would rather know where the person is sleeping than not. And so we've seen sexually violent predators registered as at the vacant building on 55th Street. And that's not really good if you're a police department worrying about somebody who committed a violent crime in the past and has been adjudged to be likely to reoffend. So the problem that the community, the working group talked a lot about was, how do we figure out a way to house these individuals and also put them in a situation where they're less likely to reoffend? So, as you'll see, the recommendations focus on that, also on better community notification. But let me talk a little bit about Christopher Lawyer, who is a significant concern for our community. His parole was revoked. You remember that he ended up in California. He committed some more parole violations. He came back. His parole was revoked in July of 2018. Chief Testa went and testified, actually, at the hearing to make sure that the parole board understood about how concerned our community was about this man. His original sentence was 12 years to life, so they do indeterminate sentencing. He got out early. He's now back. He has another eligibility hearing this July, and we will monitor that. Hopefully he will not get out. But just as a heads up, if he gets out, our community is going to be very concerned if he tries to come back here again. To some extent, he is from here. It's fair that he tries to come back here, but he committed a very heinous crime, and that was very notorious in our community. And sex offenses generally are committed against someone knows. Stranger assaults are very unusual and tend to be more violent and even deadly. And so he committed a stranger rape of a woman who was delivering newspapers. So he is among the worst kind of sex offenders, the one we worry the most about. So we will keep you apprised of what happens and keep the community informed. And some of these recommendations will also help with that. Heather, you can correct me anytime you want.
Oh, I will.
Okay, I know you will, actually.
I'm ready.
So there were 8 consensus recommendations and 1 recommendation that was pretty much made by 1 member and not supported by the rest of the group. But to honor that recommendation, I'm going to present it to you. And you saw one of my questions was, are there any parts of that council would like us to work on implementing? So there were recommendations pertaining to housing and employment, to communication and community education, and the SVP notification process. And then the bigger one that did not get consensus support was for a long-range program, of an integrated program of addressing sexually violent predators. And there are some issues with that, which I'll discuss as I get into it. So one of the biggest challenges is housing, and how so people tend to be less likely to offend if they are part of a community and have a support system. If they are out on their own, they are more likely to offend, just generally true. So the group recommended that the city seek public-private partnerships to incentivize the private sector to provide housing and show the commitment to addressing SVP housing issues, especially given the growing population of SVP in the future. The purpose of this recommendation is to say we can't necessarily guarantee something, but this should be on the city's work plan to at least try to make sure that we could do something to get housing for SVPs. Having them homeless or having them at the shelter are both bad alternatives. And we've modified the operating agreement with the shelter to limit the number of SVPs who can be there. So it's not an option for everyone. Aaron?
And to 1, right? To 1 member.
Is it 1? There are 2 there now, so.
But they were getting there through attrition rather than immediate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lisa?
So I had a question on, you have these partnerships, and these are all government-type partners, right? And so are you talking about these government-type partners would try to identify someone in the private sector that would identify housing for these individuals?
The idea is that the city would work with these partners, because these are all people who have some say over at least somebody who's out on parole. Mm-hmm. And so there are halfway houses, and but the idea is that to work proactively with the city, and the city being a partner rather than just being notified, hey, this guy's in your community. And so to have our housing folks looking for partnerships so that we're not in the situation where you have somebody who is, like Mr. Lawyer, out on the street, homeless.
But generally would be looking for some private entity that would have the housing.
Yes, that was the idea. And then the second one is to look for evidence-based programs that help reduce recidivism. This Circles of Support and Accountability program has been used around the country. It has volunteers who focus on resocializing the individual and providing support, ex-offenders. It's a model that has worked elsewhere. It has been in place in Colorado, but it's dormant now, and there have been some issues. It's always challenging to get enough volunteers and even ex-offenders who are willing to participate at the level that requires for the support of someone who is this level of risk. And so, but the program is generally a good idea, and the group supported it. Communication and education. So they recommended that the city put information regarding the SVPs on the city website with links to relevant studies, and consider developing a fact sheet that has key statistics and information about SVPs. One of the things the group wanted to do was demythicize this. You can't sort of hide the fact that SVPs are out there or what they are, but understanding the limitations on what you can do and having the information out, and we've got some of it on our website already about what best practices are, what things really are effective, what aren't. I mean, you remember this whole discussion was about residential restrictions. The group is not recommending that in any way. I mean, I think all the data we saw was that those don't really work, and they can make things worse. So that's not a recommendation of the group. And then the second one, they wanted to make sure that incoming council members were aware of SVPs and the issues. So they asked that as part of the orientation that we do when we onboard new council members, that we include a little bit about SVPs and what we're doing and the history in the past. So that you all were had this jump on you when Christopher Lawyer was sent here. They want to make sure that incoming council members have a little bit of background before they take office. There was a lot of concern about the notification process, and to a large extent, the notification process is designed for most places where no one ever shows up. And so you have a whole process, a script, you have questions on cards, and you'll have 2 or 3 people in the room. When they did the notification for Christopher Lawyer, the room was packed, and with angry individuals who felt that that their neighborhood was being put at risk. And the standard notification practice, especially the community members who participate, they felt that it wasn't adequate for that. So they'd like to see improvements in how we do it. There's an acknowledgement that the folks who do this are constantly reassessing, and I wish Melissa was here. She was one of the people who were going to come, because she actually does this, and she was very informative about the things they've tried to do to make it work, and the learning that they got from this meeting, which it was described as unique in the history of notifications in the state, because they don't usually have several hundred angry people in the room, and Boulder is not a place where people's comments are generally written on a card. People want to be able to talk, and so it needed to be done better, and so they're learning from that. And so the group recommended that. First of all, recognize that the entities that are doing this are trying to do a better job. They want to make sure we get the word out when one of these things happening, so people are not surprised and learning about it at the last minute, and that the city council be informed whenever there's a notification meeting, so that you all can participate and you can all put it out to your list so that people know that it's happening. So whenever we have a new SVP in town, there would be a notification process that you would be informed first. So these 3 specific sub-recommendations for the notification: provide the information the community needs, allow people to ask questions. As I said, people were unhappy about having to write their questions on cards and have somebody selected. That's kind of a crowd control thing that they do, but it's not Boulder, and so they didn't want that. And allow the expression of opinions. Generally, those meetings are structured as an information meeting. This is what's happening. This person's coming to your community. There isn't anything you can do about it. But that didn't go over well in Boulder. And I'm not faulting anyone. This, as I said, Mr. Lawyer is a real problem. People are perfectly justified in being really angry about him being in the community again. And the process that was set up was not really designed to deal with that situation in our community. So that's the end of the consensus recommendations. There's another recommendation that was more comprehensive, and it was drafted by one of the community members who was appointed to the board, and she put a lot of thought and work into it. There are problems with it, and it would require a significant expenditure of funds by the city to implement. It basically would require the city to provide housing and contract with the SVPs in which they would agree to certain things like not living within 1,000 yards of a school. And so there would be a contractual relationship that would fall off after a while. One of the things we heard was if someone's going to reoffend, they tend to reoffend in the first 5 years. If they haven't reoffended in 5 years, they're probably not going to reoffend. And so the idea was to spend a lot of resources partnering with the folks I've described up there to create an integrated program that would address SVPs, provide them with housing on a contractual basis, and also require them to take steps to make sure to do the things they need to do to make sure they don't reoffend. So stay in the contract housing for 5 years. There would be incentives paired with voluntary requirements targeted at the SVPs who are not being supervised. Remember I said that a lot of the folks who are out are no longer on parole, so the state has no compulsive ability to have them do anything. By providing them housing, you would have a contract where we would then have the compulsive ability to have them do things. We would reward them the longer they participate and focus on incentives. So you see, in exchange for housing, they'll avoid going to a playground, school, public pool. There are some more specifics on the next slide. The residential restrictions, some of these things would drop off, and then, of course, the bottom one, it would not be limited to North Boulder, which tends to feel a lot of the impacts because that's where the shelter is. And so there was, as I said, the support was because if you're really going to solve this problem, you need an integrated approach. You need to spend money on it, and you need to focus on it. There was not broad support because, in part, the city has a lot of housing needs. And how you would make the choice to spend money for housing a sexually violent predator than a family, that would be the choice, because someone would be getting a unit that somebody else couldn't get. Would be difficult. The units would tend to be in lower income housing, so you're putting a dangerous person in a community that's vulnerable already. So there were concerns about that approach, and also making Boulder has, per capita, a relatively low number of sexually violent predators. The highest is Pueblo. Pueblo has, I think, 14 per 100,000, and we have 3 per 100,000. So so we don't tend to attract sexually violent predators, in part, I think, because our housing costs are so high, and we don't have a prison here. I think Pueblo has a lot because there are prisons down there, and people tend to just stay there. Denver has a lot as well. Longmont's about the same as we are. So the integrated approach is a very thoughtful and careful approach. Not sure it's something that should be a city priority.
Are there any communities that do that?
Not that I'm aware of, no. You didn't hear it, no. And so I want to make clear that the committee did not, the working group did not recommend an ordinance imposing residential restrictions, which was part of our original charge, you'll recall. I even actually, I think, drafted one at one point that council had a hearing on. So that's not a direction the working group recommended. And now I am back at questions for council. Heather, did you want to add anything?
Thanks, Tom. I think the only thing that I would add is we had 3 representatives of the community, just regular folks who live here. 4. Nadia.
Yeah, Chris.
3. Nadia, Chris, and Pat. Yeah. And then we had a lot of experts. We had people from your police department. We had people from the DA's office. So it was an interesting mix of people with varying degrees of expertise and varying degrees of concern. Obviously, someone like Christopher Lawyer scares everyone, but if you were familiar with the system, some people find great comfort in that familiarity with the system, and others who don't have the familiarity don't have that comfort. This was a hard conversation, not just because the topic itself is
very uncomfortable and very scary and very emotional, but also because more than most groups that I facilitate for you, this group, there's a huge gap in knowledge, and they spent many, many meetings just trying to kind of to bridge that gap of Tom providing legal information, folks from the police department providing their experience, their legal perspective, the lawyers from both sides, both defense and prosecution, and I want you to hear how hard these people work to try to come to an agreement. Sometimes I work hard to get groups to an agreement for you. In this case, this group worked really hard to find an agreement, and just the technical and legal complexity of it made it very hard for them. They leaned in, and this is where they got.
Great. Well, thank you for the presentation, and thank you, Heather, for being here, as always. So we have 3 questions. And first, I guess, do we have any questions to ask staff?
Do we have any budgetary guidance on any of these recommendations?
No.
Okay, thanks.
And I don't know that the ones that are consensus are a heavy lift.
That was my sense as well. Yeah, okay.
Okay, shall we start with the first question? Does anybody have any thoughts on it?
I mean, I could kick us off. Heather, thank you for your work on this process. It feels to me like the group worked really hard and came up with a really solid set of recommendations. I appreciate the community members' involvement and then all the experts, and it seems like they were able to come together. And reading through them as I look through my packet, I'm like, oh yeah, makes sense. Oh, sounds good. Hey, let's do that. So to me, I know they took a lot of work, but then you read them and they just feel like they make sense. Yeah, exactly. You did. So I mean, I personally would say we just move right on forward with the consensus recommendations.
And the non-consensus, any thoughts?
Okay. No, I mean, I really appreciate that community members work on that, but it involves a level of resources that I think this is not where those resources should be focused.
I came to the same place where Tom was. How do you decide a family who needs housing or a sexually violent predator? So, I mean, I think most of us know which.
Although the part of the idea, it seemed, was of having this very integrated approach was to get past that first 5-year period.
Right.
So that the person would be less liable to recommit. So, and in looking at that, I thought, it's too bad this is left to communities to have to deal with. The funding should be there, and it should be there from the feds or from the state or something to help. But more and more of this comes back onto the communities who are the least able to deal with it.
How do you feel about moving forward with the consensus recommendations?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I really appreciate as well the work that was done, the people who were involved in it. I think it's really, really great that this was accomplished.
So on the last question, next steps, what kind of work needs to be done on the part of staff, like getting new council members ready, a fact sheet, those kinds of things?
Those things I think we can do in my office. I think the heaviest lift, and I sent this to Kurt Fernhaber, is the housing piece, the coordinating and looking, because there is that recommendation in there, and that's going to require some staffing from Housing and Human Services, and I'm happy to report back to you on that. But I mean, I help prepare the materials for the new council onboarding, and so I can do that. And the police department has a lot of data. There's some limitations on what we can disclose now. The state limited Greg's more familiar with this than I am, but we used to have names and pictures on the website, and we can't do that anymore.
Yeah, I would be interested in tracking how much time housing staff does have to work on this, and sure, if it's proportionate to number of people served. I mean, if we have 3 sexually violent predators, that's a small number. Yeah. And I just would not want our staff disproportionately spending their time finding housing for 3 people.
I guess that was my budget question, which is these all sound great recommendations. I just don't want us to, be surprised and have spent a lot of money on this without knowing about it in advance.
That was not my intent.
Okay.
Right. Yep, and I am too. So it sounds like this is going to be a pretty easy decision. I appreciate the time the community put in, Chief Testa and your staff, and everybody else who was involved with this. It looks like we've come to a pretty good place. I'm in the same place I think everyone else is. Move forward with these, don't spend too much time on it. The non-consensus recommendation would probably be great, but probably needs to be supported by a larger scale program. And so, yeah, I think that's good. Anybody else have anything that they want to add?
Well, it's a lot calmer now than it was 2 years ago in the heat of the moment. And so I really appreciate everybody kind of taking a time out from that heated moment and having time to kind of think this through and resolve it. So thank you.
Well, there's a possibility we'll have another heated moment, and I think that's what some of the recommendations really focus on, is not only how do you deal with it, but how do you learn from it so that if it happens after that, that you better. So I think it's great. Anybody got anything else? I think we're done.
Thank you.
10 o'clock.
Good timing. Good job.
Live from Paris, Soft 24.